Hey guys, welcome to Green Bean Fiction. So in today's video we are gonna see, what if Raiden Deku fell in love with Momo? Before starting, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you are interested in MHA fanfictions. This story is Izuku the Sumo Hero. Raiden by redfuryninja. Now without wasting any more time, let's dive in. When Raiden Temiman was killed at Shiva's hands, his soul was sent to Niflheim. However, there was one key misunderstanding about what happens. All the gods thought that the soul was destroyed as the soul no longer reincarnated in this world. However, this was not the case, as the soul was not destroyed, it was instead sent to another universe entirely, although it is completely random at where they would end up, and for Raiden his soul ended up being sent to the world of My Hero Academia and being born from a woman known as Inko Midoriya, and he was given a new name, Izuku Midoriya. Raiden opened his eyes to an unfamiliar sight. It was a white room with a strong smell of something he didn't recognize. He also noticed that he couldn't move his body, he was wrapped in something warm, and when he looked up he saw a woman with long green hair and green eyes. He opened his mouth to ask what was going on but realized that he couldn't speak. It finally dawned on him, he had died and been reborn. He reflected back on his past, his life as a sumo wrestler, his fight with Shiva, and his death. Death. His mind wandered to Thrud. And if she was reborn here, he hoped that Thrud was somewhere in this world as well. He swore he would find her. Or so he hoped he could anyway. 3 years had passed and he was now a toddler, but he only had one thought on his mind. Not this shit again. For the past 3 years of his life he hadn't moved a muscle and he had nothing to do, and since he was an adult in a child's body he was even more bored. The only thing he could do to pass time was watching heroes on the news. Now that looked fun to him. He couldn't bring himself to become a sumo wrestler again because, with the way his body was, he knew it was like his previous life. He didn't want to do sumo again where he would just be bullying the weak. He had a chance to move on and do something different, which brought his mind back to Shiva, to Ragnarok. He remembered the thrill of the fight, fighting with his life on the line in an attempt to save humanity from the control of the gods. He decided that he would do something similar if he couldn't do sumo, because even if he fought people weaker than him, they were evil and hurting others, and there would be those that would be able to challenge him. He smiled, he would be a hero. However, his mother was extremely worried for him and took him to multiple doctors, but no one could figure out what was wrong with him. He knew what was wrong, but it would just be more trouble to explain it all, so he let things run their course. She just hoped he would grow up healthy and strong. Raiden hoped his body was just weak and not what it was last time. Inko came to check on Izuku as she was just starting to make dinner when she saw him trying to stand up. "Oh my baby, you're doing it, you're standing up." However, she gained a horrified look on her face when he took a step and started convulsing as every bone in his body broke, and as he collapsed he thought, fuck, not again. He knew how much of a pain it would be to develop the 100 seals again. While it would be quicker now, he knew what he was doing, it would still take repeated attempts of him breaking his body to develop them. It took a couple of months and a lot of pain, but he finally developed his 100 seals to suppress his strength and stop his body from destroying itself. The muscles were a hard outer shell for the other muscles. On his 4th birthday, Inko took Izuku to see a quirk doctor to see what his quirk was, although Raiden knew it wasn't a quirk, just that his muscles were extremely strong and grew extremely quickly. It was something he brought with him from his previous life. So the doctor told him he had a mutant muscle quirk, when in reality it was not a quirk at all. When he went to school the next day, he saw a blonde kid bullying another. It was one thing he couldn't stand, was bullying and forcing power onto the weak. He had to do it in his previous life with sumo to his opponents in order to get money for his village, but he didn't have to do that here, so he would protect the weak. He would stop incidents like this. "Hey, what do you think you're doing? Why are you hurting him? I've not seen you here before. Who are you, ya fucking extra? I'm Izuku Midoriya, and answer my question, why are you hurting him? He's weak. So why shouldn't I? He thinks he can just be in my playground, doing what he wants. It's just a playground, there's no reason to bully people." He then marched up to Bakugo and shoved his palm into his chest. Teppo. This sent Bakugo flying and his cronies to run away. "Let this be known, I won't let you hurt anyone anymore as long as I'm around," Bakugo growled as he got back up. "Who the hell do you think you are, huh?" Explosions were once again popping in his hands as he charged forward and blasted Izuku, who just stood there as if nothing happened. "Huh? Shiva's flames are much hotter." He then hit Bakugo with another teppo, which sent him to the go-rund again. He shouted to all the kids that were on the playground, "I declare this playground a safe place for anyone who wants to be here. No more will there be any more bullying or picking on the weak." This was the first of many declarations of safety to come in the future because whenever Izuku was on that playground all the kids were safe to play as they pleased. This resulted in all the kids looking up to Izuku as he was the biggest and strongest among all of them and he protected them all from bullies like Bakugo. Years passed by as Izuku trained and trained every day. It kept his muscles strong but under control as well as searching for Thrud. He knew she was here. The Volunder tied two souls together. So he knew she was in this world and he could feel her too. It was like as tugging in his soul telling him she was close, but he could never find her. All he had was the red lines that went from his wrists to his fingers, reminding him of the mawashi of flesh and bone, but it was incomplete and only on his hands. He was born with them and they were a very dark shade of red, unlike the bright shade they were when he was with Thrud. They sometimes glowed red in times of stress but would fade shortly after. He missed her. He was only with her for a short time during Ragnarok, but he loved her and they pledged their lives to each other, which is why in this life he had never had a girlfriend despite multiple confessions from many girls and all the chocolates and presents he got on Valentine's Day and his birthday. His old self would have accepted them without hesitation because as Gaul had called him before, he was the incarnation of desire, but now he only desired to be with her. He was now 15 and reached a staggering 7 feet tall as well as being big and bulky, and he was still growing, likely to be the 10 feet tall he was in his previous life. In fact, the only difference between his current and past looks was that he now had green hair. It was currently class as he was sitting there bored as he was watching his teacher talk about something when he suddenly brought out papers. Since you're all third years, it's about time for you to think seriously about your future. I'll pass out handouts for your future plans now. But you're all pretty much planning to go into the hero course, right? The teacher then proceeded to throw the papers into the air as all of the class sans too started to use their quirks. Yes, you all have wonderful quirks. But using your powers at school is against the rules. Bakugo then started to speak. Sensei, don't lump us all in the same group. I'm not gonna be stuck at the bottom with the rest of these rejects. This, of course, angered the class as they started to shout at him. That was uncalled for, Katsuki. You should all shut up like the extras you were. The teacher then intervened. Oh, if I remember correctly, you want to go to U. Hi, right, Bakugo. The class was awed by this. U. That national school? It was in the top 0.2% this year, you know? Their acceptance rate's always really low, too. That's exactly why you guys are just extras. Bakugo then stood on his desk. I aced the mock test. I'm the only one at this school who could possibly get into UA. I'll definitely surpass All Might and become the top hero. My name will be inscribed on the list of top earners. The Kals started to get angry and shout insults at Bakugo for his statements at him. Oh yeah, Midoriya, you wanted to go to U. A2, right? Bakugo froze as the class started cheering him. Yeah, if it's Izuku then he'll definitely make it in. Yeah, he's even stronger than him. Way stronger. He's even more of a hero than Bakugo. Yeah, Bakugo's a bully, a villain. How can he be a hero? I once saw Izuku help an old lady cross the street as well as stop a steel beam falling onto someone with just one hand. He wasn't even hurt. He even talked Takeshi down from a roof before he tried to kill himself. Bakugo was getting even more irritated at this comments. He wasn't a villain, he was going to be the #1 hero. Explosions started to pop in his hands as his rage was reaching its breaking point. He slammed his fist on Izuku's desk, unleashing an explosion, but to his annoyance Izuku didn't even flinch. Hey, Deku, don't even think of trying to be a hero. How can you even stand in the same ring as me? Izuku then stood up, towering over Bakugo, who was only 5 feet 8 inches, making the boy step back a bit. Do you think that is enough to scare me? Your explosions mean nothing to me. I will become a hero to protect the weak, not for the fights but to save others, not for the reasons you're doing it. Izuku really didn't like Bakugo because he was nothing more than a bully. When he was Raiden, he used his strength for the good of the weak and he would keep his promise to his mother no matter how many lifetimes he went through. He became a sumo wrestler because he loved sumo and because he needed to provide for his village, but now in this lifetime he'll become a hero to protect those people and to give his mother enough money to live comfortably as his father isn't around. His mother says his father's just in another country working and sending them money. But she's worked too many late nights at the office for that to be true. Bakugo had everything: a powerful quirk, loving parents who brought in lots of money, and yet he still chose to bully and belittle others, even pushing some to suicide. He stopped all incidents of bullying where he could, but Bakugo's words still affected people. The teacher told the boys to sit down as the day ended. Bakugo tried to start another fight with Izuku. Hey nerd, don't you dare think of trying to become a hero. I'm the only one from this shitty school who'll become a hero. Do what you want, Bakugo. I will be a hero and I will protect the weak, which is way better than whatever the fuck you're trying to do. He then shoulder checked Bakugo, which sent him flying into the wall, causing him to lose his breath. He went on a walk around town so as to cool his head as he walked under a bridge when he saw something forming behind him. A giant mass of slime. An extra large sized invisibility cloak, good. And the villain launched himself at Izuku, but he just moved to the side, dodging before he jumped back. A weak villain like you can't defeat me. The villain grew angry and charged at Izuku, but he beat him to it as Izuku stepped back and charged forward, delivering a dropkick to his face, creating a giant burst of air that splattered the villain all across the wall. Just then All Might burst from the manhole cover coming from the sewers and prepped to unleash a Texas smash, but he saw that it was taken care of by a young boy who was only 3 inches shorter than he was, which shocked him as he hadn't seen anyone that tall in a long time. "Aw, thank you for the assistance, young man. I'd been chasing him for a long time in the sewers, so thank you." He then held up the 2 bottles containing the villain as proof of his capture. "It was no problem, All Might. That bastard was trying to attack me anyway, so I had a right to defend myself. Do you think I could have an autograph?" He then pulled out a notebook and pen for All Might to sign. Izuku really looked up to All Might like he did all the sumo legends in his previous life, as he was a true hero who was only a hero to protect the innocent as well as being incredibly physically strong. So he looked up to All Might because he was truly a great man and one he could respect, although he only had a few figures and posters of the man. He didn't want to go overboard, so a few were just fine. All Might was about to jump away when Izuku said, "I recommend holding the bottles as you jump. Your pockets look quite loose and the bottles are too big to be closed in." Thank you. The villain could have escaped if you hadn't noticed. "Thank you once again, my boy." And with that, All Might held onto the bottles and jumped away. Izuku walked away with a bright smile on his face. Today had been a good day. As he walked home, he saw the nearby beach, Dagoba, and frowned at it. It wasn't always like that. It used to be beautiful. Thrud would have loved the beach. His mind then went to an image of Thrud in a bikini as his nose bled a little. He shook his head as he gained a look of determination on his face. "I'll clean up that beach, and when it's done and I find Thrud, I'll show her. Plus my sumo moves have gotten a little rusty, so there's no place to really practice it. Plus with all the weights, shapes and sizes of all the trash, it will help with control of my muscles and how much force to use. Cause even if I had my Volnder, I need to know how much force to use. Don't want to accident lolly kill someone or hurt a civilian." With a new goal in mind, he once again steeled his resolve as he walked home and saw his loving mother preparing dinner. And it was his favorite as well, katsudon. He was truly blessed in this life. He would become a great hero and he would find and marry Thrud. He could always feel her with him. He just felt it in his soul that she was somewhere. He just couldn't find her. This was beginning of the sumo hero. Raiden and he would move on to become the greatest #1 hero. He would show the villains of the world the power of sumo. 10 months had passed and now it was time for the UA entrance exam. As he was walking through the entrance, he was getting many looks from the people around him, probably because of his massive size, as no one expected to see a bulky 7 foot 6 inches tall teenager. He had grown even taller over the 10 months. Izuku looked to his side and saw a girl with brown hair in a bob cut and a permanent blush on her cheeks trip, and he quickly went to her side and caught her. Careful, it would be bad luck to trip right before the exam. The girl just looked up at him and blushed, unable to speak. "Man, I can't wait for the exams. It's like when I first started sumo. It's gonna be real fun, so I've got no nerves." Well then, let's do our best, little lady, see ya." He didn't look back, but if he did, he would have seen the look on her face, which clearly showed what she was thinking, which was, "I just talked to a handsome boy." As Izuku walked away, he felt something strange. His lines on his hands felt like they were burning. They seemed angry somehow. He didn't get it. All he did was talk to a girl, but he shook his head, moving on towards the school to take the written exam first. The test definitely wasn't easy, but it wasn't too hard for him either. He'd done a lot of studying as well, since he already had strength and technocracy down. It was just a matter of refining them. It also seemed like this body had a natural talent for studying. It was now time for the physical. He was specially given a bigger set for his much larger frame. And much to Bakugo's annoyance, he was sat next to him. Present Mike was giving the explanations, ambient the robots that give points, and was about to talk about another one when he was interrupted. "Excuse me, I have a question." present mic then pointed finger guns in the direction of the speaker. Shoot. On the printout there are 4 different types of robots. If this is a misprint, then the most prominent school in Japan should be ashamed of this foolish mistake. We examinees are here in this place because we wish to become exemplary heroes. In addition, you over there, the big bulky guy, you look like you don't care to be here at all. If you're here on a pleasure trip, then you should leave immediately. Izuku stood up, showing his intimidating 7 inches 6 frame and looking at the boy who interrupted. I was actually paying attention, which seems like you weren't, because if you were, you would notice he was about to explain the next robot, but instead you interrupted and were focusing elsewhere because I'm quite far away from you. The boy then apologized and bowed before sitting down in shame. Soon after the explanation was done, it was pretty simple: just destroy the 1, 2, and 3 pointers and avoid the 0 pointer. Everyone was sent to their designated area, and Izuku was in the same zone as Mr. Stick Up His Ass. There was also the girl he caught this morning. She looked like she was having a mild panic attack, and he was about to calm her down when he was stopped by the same boy who had complained at him. Listen here, you ruffian, this is no place for your debauchery. You're really unsuited for heroics, aren't you? You can see she's about to have a panic attack, yet you're stopping others from helping her. What kind of hero are you? He shrugged the boy to the side before going to speak to the girl. Hey, it's going to be alright. You gonna do great. Just breath slowly in, out, out. She copied his breathing and slowly calmed. Thanks. I was really panicking there. He gave a confident smirk to her as the lines in his hands started to sting. No problem. I'm sure you'll do great. After he said that, he saw the doors start to open, so he charged in at the maximum speed that his sealed muscles would allow, which still left a sizable crater from where he leapt from. Izuku was going around smashing the robots that were with his line of sight, teppoing a few, drope-liking others. He even duplexed a 3-pointer into another 3-pointer. He rounded a corner only to be met with a face full of missiles. However, he dodged all of them, even grabbing a few in his massive hands and threw them back at the 3-pointer, causing them to blow up in its face. He got in close, delivering a haymaker to its head, causing the robot to split down the middle. Izuku went around destroying many robots until the ground started to shake and a massive robot started to rise up, towering over all the buildings. Holy shit! He started to move around the giant 0-pointer and destroy other robots when he saw a group of people running away. This angered him. Why? Because there was a girl trapped under rubble nearby screaming for help, but nobody came to help. He scowled before running over and lifting all of the rubble off of her. However, as he was about to lift her up and take the girl away, the 0-pointer loomed over them. He cursed. He knew what he had to do. This was gonna hurt like a bitch. He stood perfectly still and placed his hands on his thighs before gripping and twisting them. 100 seals partial release. He then did the same to his arms, and then jumped. Immediately his legs were completely crushed from the power of his muscles. He prepared for a double-handed teppo as a roared out a battle cry, not noticing the lines on his hands going up to his shoulders. He shouted, "Teppo," and unleashed his attack, completely decimating the head of the robot and sending the rest of the body flying back. It was then that he realized he didn't plan for his fall down. However, that's when he noticed that his shirt was completely destroyed, but his arms were still intact. Sure, they were a little bruised, but they weren't completely destroyed like his legs. So quickly thinking, he reapplied the seal on his arms, and as he approached the ground he used a teppo to launch an air blast, allowing him to perform a triple backflip and land on his busied hands as his legs dangled uselessly. He grinned savagely as he looked at the downed 0-pointer. He then looked over at the girl he saved, who was gapping at him. "You okay, little lady?" He grinned at her as the lines in his arm glowed and burnt angrily. "Am I okay? Look at yourself." She then recomposed herself. "You legs are completely crushed and you're asking me if I'm okay. Ha 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 ha, it's alright. They'll get better in no time. I heal fast." A siren went off signaling the end of the exam. An old lady then approached the duo. "Heal fast, my old butt. Without me your legs might never recover." Seeing that he seemed to have stamina left, she kissed his legs to see how much she could heal. However, surprisingly, his legs fully recovered without a sign of damage, and he only looked slightly winded. "Jesus Christ, boy, how much stamina do you have?" "The amount of stamina it would take to heal that injury, that's quickly would be enough to kill 3 men. Izuku resealed his legs and stood up as the old lady healed the girl broken ankle. "Thanks for the heal, by the way. It was going to be a bitch to wait for them to heal." The old lady just shook her head. If you're not careful you could cause permanent damage if you're too reckless. Izuku grinned looking at the much shorter lady who only came up to his knees. Nothing can keep me down for too long. He then started to walk to the entrance. See y'all later, old lady. Little girl. The old lady then shouted at him waving her cane. It's recovery girl to you brat. The girl just looked at his bare back dreamily, however she stopped and shivered as she thought she saw the visage of a giant Amazon of a woman glaring at her, as if telling her to stay the fuck away. When Izuku walked out the gates he felt the burning in his arms stop. He looked down at them only to finally notice they had extended all the way up to his shoulders. With his new intelligence he was able to put two and two together. He still had his Vilunder. At the very least partially. It's been dormant all these years and it's not fully active, otherwise his arms would have been perfectly fine, not bruised. Then that made him think maybe Thrud is dormant in the Vilunder. The more he unlocks the more Thrud can come out. He wonders if he can communicate with any part of her spirit. He tried calling out to her in his mind and out loud but he got nothing. Then he remembers the burning of the lines whenever he talked to random women. He smiled. He didn't know Thrud was the jealous type. That was cute. He got a faint glow from the lines before they faded away. He would definitely unlock all of the Vilunder, that way he could get Thrud back. Though he did wonder if the initial stage was just the lines burning, what more was added when they grew. As he walked home he was unaware of the spirit manifesting behind him, glaring at all the girls who thought they had a chance with her man. Though was just instinctual and no real consciousness, just the instinct of a woman trying to keep hussies away from their boyfriend. When Izuku got home he was met with a massive hug and a congratulations on him taking the exam. She even made him his favorite meal. Weeks had gone by and a letter from Ua had finally arrived. Inko had burst through his door and given him a hug as high as she could, which was surprisingly high. Inko was actually quite tall. She went through a period of stress eating when he was younger because his body was constantly breaking, but when he hit his 100 seals under control she started working out a lot, could have more fun with him and he didn't have to be so careful because she wasn't fragile, and because of her improved health she was able to return back to her original height and even grew a bit taller, eventually reaching the height of 6 feet. That was why he could confidently give his mother a tight hug without worrying about hurting her. He loved the mother of his past life, but he definitely loved this one a whole lot more. What they saw surprised them. Instead of a letter to read, a tiny little disc popped out and started playing a message for the two to watch. I am here as a projection. The mother-son duo were extremely shocked to see All Might come from the projection sent by Ua. That's right, it is I, All Might. I actually came to this town to work at Ua, and I have to say young Midoriya, your scores in the exam were extremely impressive. Him. What's this? Wrap it up. There's how many more? Anyway, you scored highly in the written exam and first place in physical portion. You scored 200 villain points, however there was something we didn't tell you about. Rescue points, of which you scored 100, your ACT of saving a young girl from the zero-pointer and your heroic acts of saving those struggling with robots was noted, and it impressed all of our judges, giving you a total of 300 points. With that you have absolutely smashed my record of 125 points. Well done young Midoriya, you passed. I'll be waiting to see you at Ua. Welcome to your hero academia. Inko had burst to tears at the end of the recording. She was so proud that her baby boy had managed to get into Ua. She peppered his face with kisses as he just smiled, used to his mother's affection at this point. He grinned. He'd get to go to Ua in half a year. This was going to be fun. He'd protect the people and show people the power. Ua better watch out because soon they'd have to ready for the strongest student they'd ever had or will have. The sumo hero, Raiden. Izuku smiled as he looked at himself in the mirror. He was in his Ua uniform, or at least what could be salvaged from his uniform. Ua hadn't predicted that he'd hit another massive spurt in the 6 months running up to Ua. Izuku saw this coming. He was 10 feet tall in his previous life, so being 8 feet at 15 was about the same as he was at the same age when he was Raiden. The shirt and trousers barely fit after taking them to a tailor to be adjusted, but they couldn't get the blazer to fit, so he'd go without. He didn't wear the tie as he didn't like wearing them, so the top few buttons were left undone. After giving one last hug to his mother, Izuku left the house and started his journey to school. Because of his size it was quite inconvenient to take public transportation, but luckily Ua wasn't too far, so if he ran at top speed he could make it in the time it would take to get the train. Even after seeing it already, the building of UA was still a majestic sight to see. Containing his awe, he made his way inside in an attempt to find his classroom. After wandering around for a while he had to conclude that he was lost and was started to get frustrated, but that's when he bumped into a girl in the corridor. "I'm so sorry, I wasn't looking where I was going." He held his hand out to help the girl. Apology accepted. "I too am to blame as I was in a rush." She looked up from the floor in order to get up and saw a giant hand outstretched. She took it, but she was shocked as she felt a jolt of energy came through it and go up her arm to her head, although she had a slight panic as she felt the control on her quirk slipping, but it was all fine as the energy quickly faded away. Getting up, her thoughts on the energy quickly went away as she looked at the person she had just collided with. Holy shit, he's huge. Her eyes had widened at the size of the man that was helping her up, thinking he must be a teacher, and now she started to panic thinking he was the one that was going to teach her class. "I'm sorry for bumping into you, sir. How can I make it up to you?" She kept rambling apologies but was snapped out of it by a boisterous laugh. "Ha ha ha ha. Sorry to burst your bubble, but I'm a first-year student." The girl was absolutely shocked. This gigantic hunk of a man was the same age as her. "Do you know where Class 1A is? This building massive and I can't find it." The girl just looked at him dumbly, still unable to process that someone that big could be the same age as her. She was tall for a girl her age, standing at an impressive 5 feet 8, and he was just over 2 feet taller than her. Izuku chuckled mentally, knowing the effect his size had on people. "I'm Izuku Midoriya, nice to meet you." That snapped the girl out of it as she introduced herself. "I'm Yaoyorozu Momo. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance, and I too am a part of Class 1A. Izuku smiled, looking down at her. She reminded him a lot of the girls he slept around with before he met Thrud. Compared to him, she was 2 feet 4 inches smaller than him, although her black hair was put into a spiky ponytail, making her look an inch or two taller. She was a skinny little thing. However, she had the biggest assets he had ever seen on someone his age. Still, Thrud was way prettier. Although it was strange he didn't feel the jealous burning that he normally felt from his Volunder, the jolt he had felt was very different from the normal burning sensation whenever he talked to a girl. He put that to the back of his mind as he spoke. "So do you know the way to the classroom?" "I have no idea where I'm going." Momo tried to look into his eyes as she spoke to him, but it was quite difficult considering the height difference. "Of course, follow me. It's still early, so we should be one of the first students there." Izuku nodded and followed the girl as she led the way, going in the direction that he came from. Good thing he found her, he definitely would have been late otherwise. The two made it to the classroom within a couple of minutes, chatting along the way. When they arrived, Momo was amazed at the giant door. Why would they need such a giant door? She then heard chuckling next to her, then realized, oh yeah, that's why. Seeing the sheepish look on her face, Izuku saw no need to comment. "So shall we head in?" He opened the door and saw that the classroom only had 2 people in it. The boy that had interrupted present mic at the entrance exam, and a boy with red and white hair as well as a burned scar over his left eye. He also saw in the back corner a desk and chair that was much bigger than all the others. At least they're accommodating to all students. Izuku then went to sit at his desk with Momo following and taking the seat next to him. The two continued to talk as the class filled with more students, most being surprised at the giant in the back. Many were too nervous to go up and talk to him given his size, but 2 people were brave enough to do so. A pink girl alongside a red-headed boy wandered up to him and introduced themselves. "Hey there, hot stuff. I'm Mina Ishido, what's your name?" Izuku smiled. "I'm Izuku Midoriya, nice to meet ya." Izuku felt the familiar burning of his Volunder. "And I'm Ajiro Kirishima." Before they could continue, another girl came in from the door and came over. "Eyes recognize that massive build anywhere. You're the one from the entrance exam that saved me." Before the conversation could continue, Ochako and Mina took a step back as they saw a spirit appear behind Momo and start glaring at them. But it disappeared when 2 students got into a shouting match. It was Bakugo and the interrupter. Earlier Bakugo just ignored Izuku and put his feet up on the desk, however this drew the ire of one student, causing the 2 to start shouting each other, but it all came to an end when a man rose from a yellow cocoon. "If you're here to make friends, then go somewhere else. This is the hero course." He started pulling out a juice box and drinking it. "It took you 8 seconds before you were quiet. Time is limited, you kids are not rational enough. I'm Shota Aizawa, your homeroom teacher for the next 3 years. He then pulled out a gym uniform. "Put on your gym clothes and meet me at the front field." Everyone got their clothes and went towards the changing room. Luckily for Izuku, the door was big enough for him to get in. The guys in the changing room were in awe at Izuku's body. "Whoa Mido bro, you're fucking ripped." What's your workout routine? Izuku just chuckled knowing how much pain he went through to get his body to where it is now. Trust me, you don't wanna know. Kirishima was confused but let it go as everyone continued changing and met Aizawa out in the field once they were done. It took you all too long to get changed. You need to be quicker and more rational if you aim to be heroes. Anyways, we are now going to have a Quirk apprehension test. He was talking but Ururaka suddenly says, what about the entrance ceremony? The orientation. If you're gonna be a hero, you don't have time for such trivial events. UA's selling point is its very flexible approach. That's also how teachers run their classes. You guys have been doing these since junior high, right? Physical fitness tests where you weren't allowed to use your quirks. The country still uses averages from students not using their quirks. It's not rational. The Ministry of Education is procrastinating. Izuku, you finished at the top of the practical exam. In junior high, what was your best result for softball throw? Izuku thought back to his junior high days. I don't know, I always threw the ball further than our teachers could track. Aizawa just sighed and chucked Izuku a ball. Stand in that circle and throw it as far as you can, and I saw your performance in the entrance exam. I want you going all out. Izuku smiled. It wasn't often that he got to go all out cause most couldn't handle his full power, but now he could. Ua really was different. He indeed, the seal on his arms causing his muscles to bulge out grotesquely, unsettling many in the class, before settling down once again as the lines along Izuku's body became a bright crimson instead of a dull. He took a pitcher stance. You might want to hold on to something. He then threw the ball, causing a huge burst of air to follow in its wake, causing everybody to be thrown back. Izuku just smirked, waiting for Aizawa to call out his score, but he had to wait a couple minutes for him to do so. Finally, the teacher held up his phone showing the score, causing the class to shout out in surprise, what the hell, 100,000 meters. Mina, ever the expert at changing the topic, then said, this looks like so much fun. We'll get to use our quirks. It looks fun, huh? You have 3 years to become a hero. Will you have an attitude like that the whole time? Alright, whoever comes in last place in all 8 tests will be judged to have no potential and will be expelled. We're free to do what we want about the circumstances of our students. Welcome to the UA Hero course. Aizawa finishes with a shit-eating grin that splits his face. Expulsion on the first day. That's not fair. Ururaka complains. Wake up, sweetie, lives not fair. I think to myself, natural disasters, big accidents and selfish villains, calamities at times and places we cannot predict. Japan is covered in unfairness. Heroes are the ones who reverse the situation. If you wanted to hang out at Mickey D's after school, too bad. For the next 3 years UA will do all it can to give you one hardship after another. Go beyond. Plus ultra. Overcome it with all you've got. This pumps up all the other students as Aizawa starts the other tests. 50-meter dash. Iida was first and he was going against a girl who insisted on being called Sue. Iida dashes with the engines in his legs and got a time of 3.04 seconds and Sue got a time of 5.58 seconds. The other times go as follows. Ururaka 7.15 seconds, Samojiro got 5.49 seconds. Ioma got sick after using his naval laser ad, so got in 5.51 seconds with Mina getting 5. Now it was time for Izuku versus Bakugo. Izuku left his legs sealed as he hadn't yet extended his legs, but even sealed he had some of the world's strongest muscles with very few surpassing them in their sealed state. He ignored Bakugo's scowl as he got into a runner's stance, and as soon as the signal went off he cleared it in 0.5 seconds while Bakugo took 4.13 seconds by launching himself with explosions. Although it was one of the better scores, he was still royally pissed that Izuku did so well. Grip strength. Everyone got average scores ranging between 30 to 60 kilograms psi. Izuku managed to crush the machine, leaving it as nothing but a scrap of metal on the floor. He hadn't unsealed his arms yet, and his training in the time leading up to UA has allowed him to use his Volunder without damaging his arms now. The only other noticeable score was a boy with octopus arms and a face mask, Shoji, who got 540 kilograms per square inch. Standing long jump. Most people cleared the sandbox using their quirks, the most noticeable being the Fog Girls, who reached the farthest apart, but it was nothing compared to Izuku, who managed to clear the entire field. Repeated side steps. No one really got a particularly noticeable apart from the midgets who used his balls to bounce side to side to get the second highest score, with Izuku just barely beating him. Ball throw. For this one, The lineup changed as Ururaka also got Infinity, putting Izuku in second. Another interesting turn was Momo's. When it was her turn, it took her. She stood there for 5 minutes while having a strained look on her face before finally a cannon came out of her back before she launched the ball from the cannon. Aizawa had a disappointed look on his face watching Momo's performance while he periodically checked files in his hand that he had pulled from somewhere. Long distance run. This event was quite easy for Izuku. He was practically stamina incarnate. The only contenders were Momo and Iida. Momo came third. Her stamina couldn't keep up with the other two. While she did make a motorbike, but it took her too long to make it and the fuel for it, as well as it seeming to exhaust her quickly, but she lasted long enough to get third, and Iida was a practiced runner and with his quirk assisting him in getting second. Seated toe touch. This was the one event that Izuku was able to do somewhat well on, because even though he didn't have a full body volunder which would have allowed him to stretch and move his muscles however he pleased, but he couldn't do that, so all he had left was the flexibility granted to him by his sumo training. Sit-ups. This one was quite simple, they just had to ask Izuku to stop. Momo was unable to keep up and dropped out quite early. And with all that done, it was finally time for the results. It's a waste of time to explain verbally, so I'll show you all the results at once. A projection then came out of his phone showing the scores of the students. Although they were confused as nothing was on it, Aizawa was doing some last-minute typing before it finally showed the scores. First Izuku Midoriya, second Shoto Todoroki, third Tenya Iida, fourth Katsuki Bakugo, fifth Fumikage Tokiyami, sixth Mezzo Shoji, seventh Mashirao Ojiro, eighth Ajiro Kirishima, ninth Mina Shido, 10th Ochako Ururaka, 11th Koji Koda, 12th Rikido Sato, 13th Tsuyu Asui, 14th Yuga Aoyama, 15th Honto Sero, 16th Denki Kaminari, 17th Kyoka Jiro, 18th Toru Hagakuri, 19th Momo Yuyorizu, 20th Minoru Mineta. Mineta and Momo both looked like they were going to cry. For different reasons, of course. Mineta's was obvious since he came last, although he was curious as to why Momo was crying. And was it just his imagination, or was Momo somehow a bit fatter than when this all began? His attention was taken away from her as Mineta burst into tears and started rolling around on the floor. I can't believe this could happen to me. I was supposed to become a hero and all the babes would flock to me. Everyone gave him disgusted looks and Aizawa looks like he was going to say something but shook his head and changed his mind. Shut up. No one is going to be expelled. It was a logical ruse to get you to try your hardest. He then looked at someone. Although some of you saw fit to half-ass things. If you're gonna be heroes, I expect you to try your best, give everything you've got. This is a school for heroes, not for middle schoolers. Bring your best to every lesson, and maybe then you'll make it as heroes. The curriculum is on your desk, make sure you grab it. He then turned around and left, leaving the class silent and in awe at his speech, although one person looked down knowing that it was mainly directed at her. The school day was finally over and Izuku was making his way home when the rest of his friends that he had made throughout the day caught up to him. Yo Midori bro, wait up. Yeah Midori, slow down. Izuku smiled as he saw Momo, Mina, Ochako and Kirishima come up to him. Hey guys, what do you want? Mina smiled and answered. To walk home with you, of course. Momo then continued. We met up and saw you, so we thought we'd catch up and go with you. Izuku smiled brightly. He never really had any true friends to walk home with, but now he had people who wanted to hang out with him for who he was, not for his quirk. Sure, I'm heading home this way. They all followed him and split off when they had to take a different path to get home until it was only him and Momo. So Midoriya, where is you house? Oh, it's quite far away normally still. Normally I run. With my size it makes it quite hard to get on buses and trains. We've been out here for quite a while, surely your mother must be worried. She'll probably flood the apartment if I'm not home in 15 minutes. Then we better hurry. Izuku was confused as to where this "we" was coming from. He decided to ignore it and carry her princess style, which caused her to let out a rather cute eep. Izuku just laughed. So the regal princess can make sounds like that too. Momo proceeded to puff out her cheeks and smack his chest, hurting her hand in the process. Meanie. Now you better hold on. Momo was confused before he started to take off. What do you mean? She was cut off as he started running at the ridiculous speeds that he had shown earlier today. It only took a couple minutes before he was outside his house. He put Momo back down. where she then proceeded to stumble and lose balance before she fell back into Izuku's chest and felt it rumble with his laughter, causing her to blush. Setting her straight once again, he asked her, "Hey, how are you getting home from here?" She simply smiled at him before she pulled out her phone. "I just messaged my driver, he'll be here any moment." And as if on cue, a limousine came round the corner, and when it parked, a butler stepped out and opened the door for her. "Well, I'll see you tomorrow, Midoriya." "Izuku? Pardon? Call me Izuku," she giggled. "All right then, as long as you call me Momo. I'll see you tomorrow, Izuku." As she turned around to give him one last smile and Izuku swore he saw something behind her, he waved her goodbye and said one last thing as she was leaving, "Yeah, see you later." Thrud. Izuku slept peacefully that night, knowing a part of Thrud had been passed on to another person. He wondered how it would affect Momo going forward, but he would just have to wait and see. It was now the next day, and when Izuku stepped out of his house he saw a limo with a large roof waiting outside. He looked at it confused before Momo stepped out and greeted him. She also looked skinnier than she did yesterday. "Hey princess, what are you doing?" Momo pouted angrily at being called that again. "Stop calling me that." Izuku was now close to her. "No can do, princess. What are you gonna do about it?" "All." She started repeatedly poking his after each word, trying to emphasize her point. "All. I'll call you a nickname. Ha, take that." She looked rather happy at this until Izuku looked down at her smugly. "And what will that be, princess?" Momo's face flushed as she didn't this far. I'll call you Musclehead. Yeah, Musclehead, you muscly bastard." Momo was rather smug at this nickname, thinking she taught him a lesson until he opened that goddamned mouth of his. "You really seem to like my muscles, huh?" Steam seemed to burst from her ears and the top of her head as she developed a full-body blush. That's not what I meant. You. What am I then, huh, princess? You musclehead." She made a metal staff and tried to whack him over the head with it, only for the staff to bend and Momo shake her hands in pain. She was distracted from this as a voice came from the large limo. "Miss Yaoyorozu, you need to hurry up or you'll be late for school." Momo looked panicked. "Come on Izuku, get in or we'll be late." "I don't think that limo will be able to hold my weight." "Don't worry, that limo can support big people and hold a lot of weight." Izuku nodded before following Momo and crouching to get in the limo and proceeded to sit down on the cushions. Surprisingly, there was enough space for him to sit down. It really was quite a big limo. He couldn't imagine how much this thing would have cost to make. "Why do you have a giant limo that can support large people?" Momo looked uncomfortable as she tried to change the subject. "So, what do you think we'll be doing at school today?" Izuku, noticing the shift, decided to leave it alone, but he left a mental note to check what that was about later. "I think it'll be normal for today. I think they'll slowly introduce us to things, making sure we're somewhat experienced in combat so we don't risk causing serious harm to each other." "That makes sense. I mean, what kind of irresponsible teacher would just have students who have never used their quirks in combat or on other people before use them on their classmates who they only just met?" "That makes sense. Today we'll be doing battle training." The sound of two people facepalming went unnoticed over the sound of All Might's booming voice. The day had gone on as Izuku and Momo predicted, with it being just a normal school day, or it was until All Might burst through the door like a normal person and announced that they would be doing battle training, which caused Izuku and Momo to remember their earlier conversation and facepalm. After that, All Might pressed a button causing 20 suitcases to come out of the wall. "You're not truly a hero unless you're dressed the part. Put on the hero costumes and meet me at Field Gamma for battle training." With that, everyone grabbed the suitcase allocated to their seat number and went to the changing rooms. Everything was going well until Mineta found a peephole. Guys, look. Our seniors left us a gift. With this, I'll get to see Yao." However, he was cut off when Izuku bitch slapped him into another wall, causing it to crack. He heard the girls say, "Thanks Izuku," before it was plugged from the other side. After that, everyone started to arrive at Field Gamma, with Mineta being the last. The most noticeable thing about him was the giant hand print going across his face, although the giant diaper was a close second. When Momo saw Izuku's hero costume, she blushed bright red. He was shirtless, allowing for the red lines going from his hands to his shoulder to be seen. Below that, he was wearing baggy white cargo pants, although the hem looked like it was made of a white mawashi loin cloth that sumo wrestlers wear. "Hey Musclehead, nice costume." Izuku smiled at her, happy that she was continuing to use the nickname. "Yours isn't too bad yourself, princess." Somehow her blush deepened further. Well, I needed a lot of open space to be able to use my quirk. What's your excuse? Well, princess, it was all I could get away with. All I wanted was the mawashi, but apparently it was too little, so I just turned into baggy cargo pants so I could still have free movement, plus it lets me have pockets too. Before Momo could say anything further, she was interrupted by All Might. Now you're looking the part, young zygotes. That's only the first step into becoming heroes. Now it's time for battle training. He then started to explain the exercise. Today we'll be doing a mock heroes versus villains battle. Before he could continue, he was interrupted by the Iida. Sir, this is a battle center from the entrance exams, so are we doing urban battles again? No, we are going to move ahead 2 steps. Most of the time fighting villains takes place outside, but statistically speaking the really bad villains appear more frequently indoors. Imprisonment, house arrest, backroom deals. In this society filled with heroes, the truly intelligent villains hide in the shadows. For this class you'll be split into villains and heroes and fight 2-on-2 indoor battles, without basic training. Sue asked. This reminded Momo about the conversation she had earlier with Izuku. She has a good point. We should be taught how to fight properly first to avoid extreme injury and collateral damage. This is a real battle to understand those basics. However, the key this time is that there's no robot you can just beat up. How will you determine the winner? How badly can we beat them up? Will the punishment be expulsion like with Mr. Aizawa? How shall we split up? Isn't this cape fabulous? I'll answer all your questions. The setting is, the villains have a hidden nuclear weapon somewhere in their hideout. The heroes are trying to dispose of it. The heroes need to catch the villains. Or get the nuclear weapon back in time. The villains need to protect the nuclear weapon for the whole time or catch the heroes. Teams and opponents will be determined by drawing lots. Random selection isn't that haphazard. Shouldn't we team up with people who suit our quirks? Iida asked, but then Izuku supplied. Pros often have to create makeshift teams with heroes from other agencies, so maybe that's why. And yes, your cape is fabulous. All Might finished answering the questions. Now it's time to pick the teams. He then brought out a box and had the students draw from it until all the balls were gone. Now anyone with matching letters are on the same team. The teams went as follows. A. Izuku Midoriya and Momo Yaoyorozu. B. Mezzo Shoji and Shoto Todoroki. C. Minoru Mineta and Ochako Ururaka. D. Katsuki Bakugo and Tenya Iida. E. Mina Ishido and Yuga Aoyama. F. Koji Koda and Rikido Sato. G. Denki Kaminari and Kyoka Jiro. H. Fumikage Tokiyami and Tsuyu Asui. I. Mashiro Ojiro and Toru Hagakuri. J. Honta Sero and Ajiro Kirishima. All Might then drew from 2 boxes to decided the matchups. Hero Team A versus Villain Team D. Hero Team B versus Villain Team I. Hero Team G versus Villain Team C. Hero Team H versus Villain Team J. Hero Team E versus Villain Team F. Bakugo gave Izuku a savage grin, thinking that he could finally put Izuku in his rightful place, beneath his boot. As Iida and Bakugo made their way into the building, Momo and Izuku waited outside making a plan. So Princess got any ideas? Momo's ears went red, still not used to the nickname but slowly coming to terms with it. She pouted and turned her head to this side. Well, of course, since you're such a musclehead and can't come up with any idea on what to do, I came up with a plan. Izuku smiled. Oh, and what is that, princess? Since you're familiar with Bakugo and given his temperament, it's obvious that he'll come after you first if that glare he was giving you was anything to go by. Leaving Iida to defend the bomb, what I propose is that you direct Bakugo's attention away from me and finish him while I find the bomb. I can either sneak around Iida, take him out and then grab the bomb, and if I can't do it quickly you can help me by the time you redone with Bakugo. Izuku gave her a beaming smile. That's a great plan, princess. She nodded. Of course, a musclehead like you couldn't come up with anything close. Izuku just laughed easily, brushing it off, knowing she was joking. Just as they had finished talking, the alarm went off, signaling the start of the match. Izuku stopped Momo from entering the building as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a large bag. He grabbed a handful of its contents before bringing it out, revealing the substance to be salt. He then threw it across the area before smiling at Momo. Come on, let's do this, and it went exactly as Momo predicted. Because as soon as they were a couple of floors up, Bakugo released a blast at them as they turned a corner. Luckily Momo wasn't hit as Izuku shielded her from it, taking no damage in the process. You're gonna have to do better than that, Bakubich. The already pissed off Bakugo became enraged at this and the fact that his explosion did nothing. So he let out a giant explosion with both hands, which created a smoke screen which allowed Momo to slip by unnoticed. All these years and you still think those petty explosions of yours can hurt me? Bakugo growled at him. You insignificant extra, you should just stay under my heel where you belong. Izuku clapped, releasing a gust of wind which cleared away all the smoke. Izuku dashed forward and went to perform a palm strike to Bakugo's chest, but he used his explosions to blast himself around it and performed a right hook back with an explosion to his face, once again doing nothing. Bakugo continued dodging Izuku's attacks for a couple minutes until his gauntlets glowed red. Ha 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 ha. You fucking Deku, try surviving this. Bakugo didn't even bother explaining as he aimed both of them at Izuku and pulled the pins on his gauntlets, unleashing a massive explosion at Izuku, who saw the explosion coming and the damage it could cause to the building, so he quickly unsealed his arms and performed as Teppo, causing a large gust of wind which counteracted Bakugo's explosion, allowing Izuku to dash forward and knock out Bakugo, who was stunned at the fact that his double ultimate attack did nothing and was so easily countered. All Might's voice then boomed throughout the speakers. Katsuki Bakugo has been eliminated. When he finally arrived at the room with the bomb, he saw it was completely empty except for the armored Iida running around with the bomb, with an out-of-breath dual taser wielding Momo chasing behind him, with a discarded bow staff lying on the ground. A couple minutes ago, Momo had just arrived at the floor with the bomb in it and was currently hiding behind pillar watching Iida spouting a cliché villain monologue despite to his knowledge there being no one to talk to. Momo made a staff and snuck up behind Iida and went to hit him over the head with it. However, it didn't do much as it just bounced off of the helmet, causing the girl to recoil in shock as she had to jump back to avoid Iida's kick, but it hit the staff, sending it clattering to the ground. Ha 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 ha. Foolish hero, do you think that mere staff could make an impact on my steel amour? All you attacks shall be pointless. Momo then made 2 tasers, one in each hand. Oh, then what about these? Iida's eyes widened as he quickly ran away and grabbed the bomb, taking it with him so Momo couldn't take it as he ran from her tasers. Iida at this point was too far away to tase, so she had to get close enough to him to do so, but he was just too fast. Foolish hero, I cleared this room of all objects so I could easily run around unimpeded, and his plan easily worked. That was until he was clotheslined by Izuku, causing his head to snap back as he was forced to the ground. Izuku caught the airborne bomb in one hand as he grinned at Momo. Seems like you needed some help, princess. It took a minute for the panting Memo to respond. Screw. She let out a huff of air. You. Another followed. Muscle head. You've only been running for a couple minutes, how are you out of breath? By this time Momo had recovered enough to speak normally. Not all of us are stamina freaks like you. I get tired when I run. The bomb has been captured. The hero team wins. Drats. I was so close to winning, if only it wasn't for you dastardly heroes hadn't gotten in my way. Izuku just laughed at the boy. Iida, the exercise is over, you don't have to put on the cliché over-the-top villain act. Iida looked taken aback as his face fell. Cliché. Over the top. They all started wandering down back to the waiting room, passing the knocked out Bakugo, who was being transported to the medbay on a stretcher by a pair of robots who were talking about the frailty of humans. Back in the control room, All Might was giving the rundown on the match. The MVP of this match is young Midoriya. Can anybody tell me why? No one seemed to say anything until Momo spoke. The Midoriya is the MVP because he limited the collateral damage that could have occurred because of Bakugo's quirk, disposing of him quickly before assisting me with Iida taking him down in one hit, causing no damage to the bomb in the process, and catching it, which had it been real could have gone off if it hit the floor. The amount that she said shocked All Might. She said more than I expected. That was correct. All right everyone, let's change location and start the second match. Tackle this training after thinking about what we just talked about. The following matches all went by pretty quickly. Hero Team B versus Villain Team I. Todoroki simply froze the entire building, incapacitating Toru and Ojiro. Hero Team G versus Villain Team C. This was another quick match. Jiro located the other team quickly, and even though Kaminari got trapped in Mineta's balls by the bomb, he unleashed his electricity, taking out the 2 heroes in training. Hero Team H versus Villain Team J. Despite bonding up the door with Sero's tape, once all the lights were destroyed, Dark Shadow easily took care of them. Hero Team E versus Villain Team F. Team F stood no chance, with Aoyama's lasers taking animals out, and no matter how much Sato's strength increased, it didn't do much against Mina's acid, so they could easily get the bomb. And with that, the day came to an end with Momo taking Izuku home in her limo. Although at some point she ended up falling asleep, after a sharp turn her head ended up falling onto his lap, causing him to chuckle lightly as he started to run his fingers through her hair. She really is adorable. Unnoticed to him, his velunder lightly glowed blue as it extended down to his pecs, finally uniting the two separate lines as they started to move onto Momo's hands, painting her fingernails red but leaving the rest untouched. What he did notice, however, is that they both glowed yellow before it quickly died down as he felt a mental connection to Momo. He could feel what she was feeling, and it was the same as him. Did they accidentally bind together, similar to a velunder? From what he learnt from Thrud, while the velunder allows for a Valkyrie to transform into a weapon for its wielder. What powers it is the power of Samavadana, which allows two souls to connect as long as their hearts align. He didn't realize that they had gotten so close so quickly, but it makes sense, they've barely spent any time apart since they first met. He smiled. She was the second person ever he could learn to love, and while she was small she had a personality he could easily fall in love with, not to mention the connection she had with Thrud. Looking down at her now, he could swear he saw Thrud smiling at the girl rubbing Momo's arm reassuringly. Sometimes their forms overlapped but mostly remained separate. However, good things had to come to an end when the car stopped, causing Momo to wake up. However, she didn't immediately move away. In fact, it seemed that she snuggled even deeper into his lap. "Enjoying yourself, princess?" She blinked her eyes a couple times and realized where she was laying. It wasn't a really comfy cushion. It was Izuku. She then proceeded to jump up and let out an eep. She had a blush on her face as she glared at him. Not a word. She could practically feel the smugness coming from him. Wait, no, she could actually feel his smugness as well. How his emotions changed as he saw the look of surprise on her face. But before she could say anything, her door was opened. "Miss Yaoyorozu, we have arrived at your guest's abode." She nodded, a bit disappointed, but stepped out so Izuku could as well. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll talk tomorrow." She nodded before poking his chest. "You better all my questions, musclehead." He smiled her before performing a mock bow. "Of course, your wish is my command, princess." She huffed and tilted her head upwards, feeling his amusement. "You better." "I'll see you tomorrow, Izuku." "I'll see you tomorrow, Momo." Both smiled as they waved goodbye, with Momo getting back into the limo with it driving off shortly after. That night after Momo fell asleep, she was plagued by weird dreams. First it started with a small pink-haired girl. When she was young she was the smallest among all of her sisters, but very quickly she started to grow and become bigger than everyone. As she grew, it scared off everyone close to her that wasn't family. Even those she once called her closest friends. She had sought love and affection only to get her heart broken over and over, eventually stealing it as she grew to a massive size. She looked way bigger than Izuku was, and he's huge. However, she watched as her relationships with her sisters grew with the birth of the youngest, carrying her around on her shoulders, scaring off bullies. However, this dream stopped as she was about to enter a door. After that dream, Momo watched the life of a poor boy in ancient times, how he couldn't move, and when he tried his body she just destroy itself. It broke her heart to watch this happen. Eventually the boy grew up and he started to look like a brown-haired Izuku without freckles. The young man started the life of a sumo wrestler. In order to raise money for his village, he made true friends amongst his sumo wrestlers, but soon he started to be feared for his strength. At least those of his dojo never gave up on him and stayed as his friends. But Sumo, his one love in life, did not love him back, as he soon had to step back into an early retirement and fade into history, and eventually died of old age. Until suddenly young again. She got angry when he was surrounding himself with beautiful women and sake in the afterlife. However, his personality seemed to take a twist when she saw a familiar door and the woman from before walked in, and as the two looked at each other, only now did she realize how big the woman was. She towered over the man. Her heart ached when it appeared to be love at first sight, the man claiming that he loved big women. Momo looked down at herself in sadness. She was the exact opposite of the women. While she was tall for a girl her age, she was the exact opposite of muscly. In fact, in this dream she looked at her true form in shame. That man definitely wouldn't like her. A lone tear went down at her eye at the thought that Izuku wouldn't like her if he knew what she was really like. However, her attention was brought out of her self-loathing as she watched the two glow before becoming one. All that remained was the man with red lines like Izuku, except he had it all over his body instead of just his arms. What preceded shocked her as the man walked out into a giant arena with the stands being filled with creatures of all shapes and sizes on one side and the other was filled with humans. Inside the arena opposite the man was a purple man with 4 arms and an eye in the center of his forehead. After quick introductions that she couldn't quite make out, the two fight for 11 minutes and 16 seconds. It was a magnificent fight that showed the prowess of the two martial artists, and when it finally ended with the man's death, Sei saw the woman going with him, refusing to separate even though they knew each other for less than a day, showing the unbreakable bond that had formed between the two. Momo shed a tear for the two lovers as they faded away. Before she could see any more, she heard a blaring sound and jolted awake, panting and sweating. She started looking around to get a sense of where she was, only to realize it was her room. That's right, it was just a dream. Yeah, just a dream. She started to calm down, especially when she felt feelings of reassurance coming through the link. She put her hands over her heart, feeling her worries she felt during the dream fade away into the back of her mind. Thank you, Izuku. Her morning rituals went smoothly, although things were awkward during breakfast. She was still thinking about had dream last night and so wasn't focusing on the gourmet meal in front of her that the chefs had prepared for her. She was finally snapped out of it when her mother spoke. Momo dear, what's wrong? You've barely touched your food. Momo started to sputter as she was brought out of her thoughts. It's nothing, mother. I was just thinking about a dream I had last night. Momo's face fell as she recognized the look on her mother's face. Oh, was it about a boy? Was it about your boyfriend? When do we get to meet him? Momo's face was bright red. Mother, she accidentally shouted before she recomposed herself, seeing the teasing smile on her mother's face grow. Mother, Izuku is not my boyfriend. I never said it was Izuku. Mother, please stop. Momo stormed off only to quickly come back, grabbing her food before storming off again. Her mother just sighed. I wonder who she gets that from, dear. I believe it's you, love. Remember what you were like with your mother when we first met. Mrs. Yaoyorozu hid her face in her hands. Please don't remind me, she still brings it up every Christmas. Mr. Yaoyorozu just chuckled as he rubbed his wife's back. Momo was still pouting when her car pulled up to Izuku's house and he got in as the butler opened the door for him. Thanks, Alfred. The butler simply nodded before closing the door behind Izuku, then proceeded to get into the car himself and start driving towards Ua. Momo was still quiet, thinking about her dream. Maybe Izuku knew something but she didn't know where to start. Izuku, feeling this, he spoke. So I guess you're wondering what this connection you're feeling is. She nodded. Yeah. I can sense what emotions you're feeling at any given moment. You could say it's a part of my quirk, your quirk. Isn't it just super strength? He shook his head, his long hair which was tied in a ponytail shook with it. Now that she was looking at it, the style was very similar to her own. While I was born with extreme strength. You could say it's one part of my quirk. What you could consider my quirk, or the main part of it, is the ability to control my strength, because I developed the control much later on. In my early life I caused extreme harm to myself because I couldn't control my muscles. This reminded Momo of her dream, but Izuku didn't know this. I eventually got a handle on it, but it limited my strength. These red lines are what allow me to control my muscles to the fullest. Momo nodded but didn't see how that resulted in the connection. You see, my power isn't meant for one person to wield alone. It's meant for two people working together. It's only recently that I've been able to use my full strength without hurting my arms. But even then I can still hurt them if I'm pushed too far. So these lines are the mark of two bonded souls, so one can use the strength and the other can stop the damage. However, the one whose soul I originally bonded with died soon after getting this power, and it's left the growth of it stunted. It only covered my hands when I was younger, but ever since the entrance exams it goes all the way up my arms. Momo was nodded along, not feeling any lies, only a sense of confusion, and she guessed that was him trying to figure out how to explain it to her. This happens when two people of opposite genders' hearts align. They can form this soul bond, increasing the power and control. Although I'm not sure what effect it will have in you. And for that I'm sorry. Momo just waved her hands in front of her. No. No, it's okay. If anything, I'm glad it's nothing nefarious, and it also meant that you felt what I'm feeling. I trust you, Izuku, and whatever happens we'll face it together. Yes, together. Izuku handed his hand over Momo's and the two had their eyes closed, about to kiss. But that all came to an end when the car stopped jolting the two out of it as the butler opened the door. "Miss Yaoyorozu, we have arrived at the school." Both teens' faces were bright red as they climbed out of the car. Although instead of the clear pathway, with students that they expected to see, they were crowded by reporters, even just getting out of the limo caused a sea of them to impede their path and started asking their questions. Momo, being from a rich family, was used to this, so she was about to speak but was beat to it as Izuku answered one of their questions. "With a stature that big you must be pretty powerful. Do you think you should be the next All Might?" "While I do admit that I have a larger stature, I do not believe I am the next All Might. Even though something I should be, I think that no one should be the next All Might. Everyone should be their own hero, not some cheap knockoff raised specifically to be the next All Might. Everyone is different and no one is truly the same or be forced into being someone else." Somewhere a man wearing glasses sneezed as laughing could be heard in the background. While the reporter was stunned by his answer, Izuku picked up Momo. "Hold on, princess." Momo, remembering last time, quickly held on as Izuku used his strength to jump over UA's walls to avoid the rest of the media. When he put her down on the other, she smacked his chest. "Stop doing that, muscle head." He just grinned at her. "Then you'll just have to stop me them." Momo blushed in a rage as she followed behind him to head to class. Things started to calm down by the time they made it to class. The students were abuzz talking about the swarm of media outside. It was Aizawa that had to silence everyone as it was time to start the lesson. "All right everyone, quiet down. Today we have something important that will determine your experience here at UA for the next 3 years here at UA." All of the class tensed, thinking it was going to be a test or something equally stressful. "You'll be picking a class president." This caused the most to shout out. "It's a normal school activity." Aizawa silenced them by glaring with his quirk. "It doesn't matter how you do it, but as long as you have a class president and a vice president by the end of this lesson, that will be all." He then got into his sleeping bag and started to sleep in the corner as the class started shout out about how they should be the class president before Izuku clapped his hands, releasing a sound that shut everybody up. "Now let's calm down. Shouting out like this isn't going to do anything. I propose we vote for the candidates we think most deserving for the position, and we can't vote for ourselves, so everything is fair. Whoever gets the most votes, even though we don't know each other very well, shows their skill in gathering trust already, even though it's only been a couple days." Izuku's idea seemed like a good one and his speech answered the questions most people like Suyu would have had. Izuku asked Momo to make a box and paper and handed them out to everyone to write on. When Izuku had finished tallying the votes, the results were: Izuku Midoriya 10, Momo Yaoyorozu 5, Shoto Todoroki 2, Suyu Asui 1, Tenya Iida 1, Katsuki Bakugo 1. Izuku smiled. "And with that I am the president, with Momo being the vice. Does anyone disagree?" Most of the class agreed with him except one. "Which one of you shitty extras voted for Deku? I'll fucking kill you." He was promptly ignored as soon after the bell rang and it was time for the next class. It was now lunchtime as Izuku and his friends started eating the food made by Lunch Rush. Well, the ingredients for Izuku's meal were prepped by Lunch Rush as he had it all in a giant hot pot cooking over a small burner. With such fine ingredients, Izuku had enjoyed eating the hot pots he could make at the school, and the rice made by Lunch Rush was divine. He had so much rice, if it was all put into a ball it would be the size of Momo's head. Sitting opposite him was Momo. Alongside them was Mina Ishido, Ajiro Kirishima and Ochako Ururaka. They were just mindlessly chatting with Momo and Izuku, occasional sneaking glances at one another. However, this was interrupted when the school's alarms started going haywire, repeating, "Security level breach level 3. Please evacuate in a calm and orderly fashion. Security level breach level 3. Please evacuate in a calm and orderly fashion." The students of course did not follow this directive as they started panicking and ran to the exit. Ururaka managed to get the attention of a senior and ask what was going on. "It's a level 3 breach. That means villains have infiltrated the campus. This has never happened during my 3 years here at UA." After that he too started running towards the exit. The group of first years started to go to the exit too, but the smaller ones were struggling as they were getting pushed and squished by the crowd. Izuku, who was easily 3 feet over most, was having little difficulty, but seeing Momo hurt made him frown, so he quickly picked her up, startling the girl as she was put on his shoulder. "What are you doing, muscle head? You're uncomfortable being pushed by so many students, so I thought I'd save you." "But why like this?" "It's what first came to mind." Momo was embarrassed because she was now sitting on Izuku's shoulders, unknowingly squishing his face between her thighs. Izuku was looking outside and saw it was just the media who broke in, so he deciding to silence everyone like he had earlier. He released a massive clap, letting out a large booming sound, drawing all attention to him as he shouted, "Everyone calm the fuck down, it's just the media, ACT like the goddamned fucking UA students you're supposed to be." This calmed the students as more looked outside and clearly saw it was the media causing everyone to go back to what they were doing. Eventually the sirens stopped and everyone could go back to normal. Everyone was now back in the classroom with Aizawa at the center. "Before I begin, Izuku, good job in calming down the crowd of students. You're already proving that you deserve the role of class president." Izuku was happy to receive genuine praise from his teacher, causing Momo to smile as she felt his happiness. The rest of the day went normally, and at the end of it all Momo took Izuku back to his house. Before she left him, Momo decided to say something. "Hey Izuku, since it'll be the weekend soon, do you maybe want to hang out sometime?" She then started to ramble. "It's okay if you don't want to. Of course you might be busy or have other plans or just generally don't want to, but it's okay, I understand you're busy, okay bye." Before she could leave, Izuku stopped her and gave her a 1000W smile. "I would love to hang out with you, princess." Momo returned his smile with an innocent smile of her one. "I can't wait. Anyways, I'll see you tomorrow, muscle head." She quickly hurried back to her limo as it soon drove off. Izuku shook his head, his smile still on his face. It was the day after and everyone was waiting for Aizawa to begin the lesson. "Today will be different. You won't have any normal lessons, instead you'll have," he flipped round the card in his hands, "rescue training. We'll be going to the UA facility USJ, and no Kaminari, it isn't Universal Studios Japan." The boy looked disappointed. "Put on your hero costumes and meet me outside to get on the bus." The suitcases once again came out of the wall, as the class grabbed their suitcases and went to get changed. Iida, despite holding no authority, was trying to get people to line up for the bus, but Izuku burst his bubble. "Iida, it's not that type of bus, so shut up." He got on the bus, sitting on the extra big seat made for him, with Momo following behind and sitting next to him. He was happy the school was so accommodating that he could still do everything despite his size. As the bus started going, Suyu started a conversation. "Hey Midoriya, Kiro." "Yes Su." Su nodded, happy that someone remembered to call her Su. "I'm blunt and say whatever's on my mind." "Okay, what's your relation to All Might?" "Your quirks are pretty similar." Izuku just laughed at this. "I've got no relation to All Might." "You know, not all strength quirks are related. Death Arms has a strong enhancement quirk. Does that mean he's All Might's brother?" "What about people with fire quirks? There's a villain that was reported on the news recently called Dabi, who's known for burning heroes alive. Is he Endeavor's son just because he has a fire quirk?" Suyu nodded, conceding his point. "That makes sense, Kiro. But you have to admit your strength is pretty flashy. With it and your personality you'll be a high-ranking hero." Kirishima then piped in. "Yeah, my quirk's not all too flashy, all can do is harden myself. I doubt I'll be able to rank high." Izuku decided to cut in. "That's still a magnificent quirk in and of itself. You can be the shield that protects people from all sorts of things. And I don't see the point in ranking. Isn't the role of a hero to save people no matter what? So why does ranking you have? Even the lowest ranking heroes make enough to have a decent living, and those that don't generally cause lots of damage in their fights. That debt for fixing everything piles up." Everyone nodded along to this. Although the conversation diverted back to the flashiness of everyone's quirks, but it soon came to an end as the bus stopped. "Stop your chatter, everyone, we're here." When the class stepped out in awe as they looked at the giant buildings, however their minds were blown once they saw inside of it. All the different zones in it made it seem like it actually was a theme park. Once inside, they were greeted by UA teacher and Pro Hero 13, whom Ururaka was currently gushing over. "Hello everybody and welcome to the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, which I had a hand in designing. Before we begin, I have 4, 5, number 6, maybe 7 points." Everybody thought, "That's a lot of points." Today you'll be learning another side of heroics, rescue work. With Aizawa's class you discovered the limits of your quirks. In All Might's battle trials you learned how your quirks can harm others. Here you'll be learning how to help others with your quirks rather than harm. My quirk Black Hole can easily be used in rescue to clear away rubble to save, but just as easily it can rip a person to shreds and turn them into dust. I want you all to understand the inherent dangers of quirks and how to use them." Izuku nodded, agreeing. remembering his dark days of when people were too scared face of against him in sumo because of his strength. Momo was concerned for Izuku as she felt his sense of melancholy through the link, despite the smile on his face. She took his hand in both of hers and gave him a reassuring smile as he smiled back down at her, feeling better. Everything however came to a stop when Kirishima said, "I didn't know there were gonna be fake villains." This caused Aizawa and 13's eyes to widen as they looked down at the central plaza, seeing many villains walking with some sort of misty. "Everybody get ready. Those aren't fake. Those are real villains." Izuku tensed, ready to get into combat at any moment. He came here for rescue training, but now it was time to fight. Izuku stared down at the villains, his eyes locking with those of the big muscular villain that had a beak and exposed brain. As the lockdown procedures were activated, metal shutters blocked all exits. Izuku was snapped out of his stare down as the misty portal disappeared and reappeared next to them as a misty man as he then started speaking. 13, and Eraserhead huh. "The teacher's schedule we received the other day said All Might was supposed to be here." Aizawa then realized something. The trespassing the other day was the work of these scumbags after all huh. The main villain, who had light blue hair and a hand on his face as well as over his body, spoke. "Where is he? I went through the trouble of bringing this whole crowd to All Might, the symbol of peace, and he's not here. I wonder if he'll come if we kill some kids." 13 watched of the students as she realized that the trespasser sensors were not working, which meant there was a quirk at play. 13, start the evacuation. Try calling the school. These villains even had something to counteract the sensors. It is possible someone with radio-type powers is interfering. Kaminari, you try to contact the school with your quirk. "Yes, sir." Iida spoke up, concerned for his teacher. "What about you, sir? Will you fight by yourself? With that many, even if you can erase their quirks?" Eraserhead's fighting style is capturing after erasing the enemy's quirk. A frontal battle is. "You can't be a hero with just one trick, kid. I'm leaving it to you." 13. He then jumped down the stairs and he charged at the enemy, erasing their quirks one at a time as he tied some up and slammed them together as he started fighting the horde of villains with ease, annoying the main villain and amazing the class as they started to leave. Seeing the doors were now blocked, he unsealed his arms and thrust his fists forward, creating a shockwave big enough to create a hole in the door. He decided to leave his arms unsealed just in case he needed to fight. The mist villain spoke again. "Nice to meet you. We are the League of Villains. It may be presumptuous of us, but we have invited ourselves into the home of the heroes, Ua High School, in order to have All Might, the symbol of peace, take his last breath. I believe All Might should have been here. Was there some kind of change? Well, that is neither here nor there. This is the part 1 I'm to play." Before 13 could attack the villain, Bakugo and Kirishima got in the way, but failed to do anything. "Oh dear, that's dangerous." "That's right, even if you are students, you're excellent golden eggs." 13 ordered the two boys to move away as the mist man spoke again. "My job is to scatter you all and torture you to death." The mist wrapped around everyone, but some people managed to make their way out of it as people were thrown into different zones. Izuku didn't know what happened to the others, however, he couldn't focus on that as he was falling towards a large body of water. There was a boat Izuku caught out of the corner of his eye. Deciding the best course of action was to get to it, he released a kick, causing a small blast of air that allowed him to land on the boat. A moment after he landed, he saw Momo suddenly come out of the water, attached to a pink appendage. When she stood up, he had to hold himself back from laughing. This was because with her hair down and wet she looked like she belonged in a horror movie. Seeing his expression, Momo let out a huff. "Not a word, you hear me?" Izuku looked affronted. "Of course not. Why would I say something? Although I feel like I shouldn't watch anything on VHS for a while." Momo's scowl deepened as she smacked his arm. "Shut it, you. Can you two stop flirting? We've got bigger things to deal with." This snapped Izuku and Momo out of their bit as Suyu hopped onto the bot and let out one of her usual blunt comments. Momo flushed as Izuku just laughed. "You're right, so what's the plan?" Momo smiled as she held out her hands as a grenade formed in each of them. "I say we go fishing." She pulled their pins and then tossed them both into the water. Shortly after, there were two explosions as some villains were sent into the air as others just floated helplessly in the now turbulent waters. "Nice job, princess." Momo puffed her chest. "Of course, it's only natural. I'm a recommendation student for a reason." Izuku smiled as he grabbed both of them, causing Momo to blush as she was held against his muscled chest. Su, however, stayed blank-faced as usual. His right arm, in which Su was held, glowed an angry red, while the left arm, which held Momo, stayed calm. Once he had grabbed both of them firmly, he crouched down before performing a massive leap and ended up landing back on the edge of solid ground. However, this caught the attention of the blue-haired villain. A few moments prior, Aizawa was in the center kicking the ass of all the villains around him as countless were down and out for the count. When most were down, the hand villain charged at Aizawa while counted down, but as they got close, Aizawa went for an elbow to the villain's stomach, but it was caught. It's hard to see because you keep moving around. But there's an instant where your hair falls down. This shocked Aizawa because he realized where this was going as his elbow started decaying. That's when you've finished an action and the space in between has gotten shorter and shorter. Don't push yourself, Eraserhead. Muscle was now showing by the elbow as all the skin had decayed away, but Aizawa jumped back and decayed his quirk to stop the crumbling, but more villains swarmed him as he now had a useless arm. That quirk isn't suited for fighting long fights against a large group, is it? Isn't this too different from your usual job? What you're good at is a short fight after a surprise attack, right? Even so, you jumped right in to fight us from the front. Was that to put your students at ease? The villains charged forward, but Aizawa still was taking them down easily, even with only one arm, as he once again faced the hand villain. You're so cool, you're so cool. By the way, hero, I'm not the last boss. His head was then grabbed by a large hulking bust with a beak and an exposed brain, and it beat him down. I'll tell you, Eraserhead. He's the anti-symbol of peace, the bio-engineered Nomu. His arm was then snapped as he was pinned by the Nomu. You can erase quirks, that's wonderful, but it's nothing impressive. In the face of overwhelming power, you might as well be quirkless. He then glared at the Nomu, but that stopped as his other arm was stamped on by the Nomu. He's breaking my arm like a twig. I'm sure I erased his quirk, which means he is just that strong. He's as strong as All Might. His head was then slammed into the floor as the three students who just landed as they watched in horror at their teacher being brutally beaten. The thud the students' landing turned the villain's attention to them, and at that moment he sported a manic grin. Maybe All Might will come if we kill some students. And at that moment Tamura charged forward at incredibly speed, making some think he had a speed quirk, and in the blink of an eye he is in front of the and went to grab Momo, grabbing but was interrupted as Izuku let go of them and moved faster than anyone could react. He released a palm strike to the man's chest, sending him bouncing along the ground until the misty villain teleported in and caught him. Tamura Shigaraki, I was able to scatter the students and incapacitate 13 with her own quirk, but one of them managed to escape. Shigaraki growled, in both pain and anger. Kurogiri, if you weren't our escape route, I'd kill you. Kurogiri said nothing and just helped Shigaraki to his feet. The villain glared at Izuku as he gained a maniacal grin and rasped out, Nomu, kill him. The giant creature that had just finished brutalizing the teacher charged at Izuku, fist cocked back ready to throw a punch. However, the attack was stopped as Izuku met it midway with one of his own, neither being pushed back. Seeing this, Shigaraki cackled, ha 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 ha, you really think that would be enough? Nomu is the anti-symbol piece, he has a shock absorption quirk. Izuku just smirked, hey, guys like you are a real pain. Izuku dived in low, grabbing the Nomu's waist. He hoisted him up and threw him to the center of the plaza. As the Nomu got up, it didn't have time to react as its face was met with Izuku's feet as he performed a drop kick. The Nomu didn't move an inch even as Izuku used its face as a springboard to backflip, landing directly in front of the Nomu, staring down at it. Angry at the inaction, Shigaraki shouted, get him, Nomu, fucking kill him. The two started a furious exchange of blows, neither side moving, making those who watched think Izuku had a shock nullification quirk as well. After each blow, Izuku felt his body getting hotter and hotter. Seeing that no progress was being made, he knew he had to do, but without Thrud he had no idea what it would do to him. He made some space and quickly unsealed his legs. His eyes widened slightly as he saw that they were covered in red lines. His Volunder was almost complete. All that remained was his torso connecting his upper and lower halves, and then it would be complete. Izuku's legs bulged and contracted as the muscles were brought under control. He channeled his legs and hand before concentrating it into his palm. It was a half-assed version is what it was, as the Volunder wasn't complete, meaning the energy perfectly, but if he could perform it without a Volunder when he was a sumo wrestle, he could perform it now when he was 80% unsealed. His muscles started to move, leg to leg, arm to arm until all of his muscles were in one leg and arm. He narrowed his eyes as he cried out, Yatagar Asu. Izuku preformed the ultimate form of Teppo and the Nomu reached out in fear as it crossed its arms. Shigaraki didn't even know it could feel fear. The entirety of the USJ shook as a massive shockwave ran across it, but not a single sound was made as the blow was strong enough to remove all sound. The students watching cheered silently thinking Izuku had won with the Nomu lay on the ground, as only its legs remained, but it soon came to a halt as Izuku grunted in pain, blood spurting from all over his body as his arm started to convulse before it collapsed on itself. Izuku counted himself lucky. If he had any less control he would have lost his arm. Even though the attack was weaker, so was his control, causing even more backlash than the last time he used it. He panted though and smiled thinking he had won, but this moment of distraction was all it took for the Nomu to land a hit as it regenerated and attacked while Izuku was unfocused, sending him crashing into the stairs. Momo screamed, Izuku no, although Izuku swore he heard two voices shout out. Foolish hero, you think you can beat the anti-symbol of peace? He has super regeneration as well as super strength and speed quirks. You don't stand a chance. Now let's give you some incentive. He once again ran towards Momo. A look of fear entered her eyes as she saw a visage of a woman try to shield her, but the hand just went through. His hand nearly reached her face. He seemed unable to see the ghost of a woman blocking his way. However, what he was stopped by was Izuku's arm, as the boy stood in front of the two girls. He looked behind him to see the stairs shattered, but he just grinned. Got you, hero. Izuku kicked the villain in the ribs, further breaking them as Kurogiri caught him. Izuku's decaying arm started to spread, but he thought fast and used the Volunder to have the muscles rip themselves out of his arm, taking the decaying flesh with it, leaving another mangled arm. Shigaraki laughed, coughing up blood in the process. You're done now. What can you do without those arms you're so proud of? Izuku similarly coughed up blood and just smiled. My arms mean nothing. I'll show you why I'm the peerless Rishiki. He then flipped, going to crush the Nomu with his legs as an image of a lion appeared behind him. Shishimai. With there he pounded the Nomu into the ground and used the momentum to take it with him as he wrapped his legs around its torso and squeezed. Wild boar. He squeezed as much as his muscles would allow. Which was a fucking lot even in his weakened state. The Nomu, who had taken so many hits, was starting to reach its limits as it bulged and its upper half was blown off. As Izuku had lost his grip, he jumped back but watched on as the legs stood up and made its way to its body before they reconnected. You can't do anything. Just despair. Watch helplessly as you can do nothing in your final moment. Izuku just smiled, standing strong. He still had not fallen even after all the hits he's taken. You know, I think it's time to finish this. Ha 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 ha, I couldn't agree more. Izuku looked behind the Nomu and saw Momo and the visage of Thrud looking at him with concern and worry. It's going to be okay. I'm going to win. And what makes you so confident? Well, I picked up a thing or two from a friend of mine. His stance changed entirely as he started to move strangely, almost like a dance. Shigaraki didn't like where this was going. Nomu, don't let him complete whatever he's doing, finish him. The Nomu ran in. However, instead of tanking it like usual, Izuku dodged and weaved around the attacks, all while concentrating within his body. He used the Volunder that covered his upper chest to squeeze his heart muscles. He took deeper and fatter breaths as his heart began to beat rapidly, faster than it ever had before, taking more oxygen to his limbs. Despite the speed of it, his breathing remains calm as he uttered one word, Tandarva. His legs suddenly became alight with fire, surprising all who saw it. Izuku grit his teeth in pain of being on fire and using his muscles to cause friction to start it. He glared at the Nomu and Shigaraki as the ground beneath him burned. With the Nomu starting to sweat. You don't threaten her. You don't attack her and get away with it. You going fucking down, Shigiraki. He went in for a couple kicks. The Nomu, fearing for its life, dodged all of them. And good thing too, because shockwaves came from each hit, shortly followed by a burst of flames. But it couldn't keep this up for long as Izuku's clumsy moves started to become sharper as he got used to moving this way, as well as being in fire. The last thing the Nomu saw was Izuku's face as it was hit by a spinning heel kick, releasing a torrent of flame, torching its entire upper half, leaving nothing but a motionless pair of charred legs. Diva Loca, Izuku muttered as he stumbled but remained his feet. This was the scene that All Might arrived to as he announced his presence with a bellow. Everything is fine now. Why, because I am here. He was stunned, however, as he glared down, expecting to see a horde of villains. But what he saw instead was a huffing Izuku surrounded by unconscious villains. Yaoyorozu and Asui were standing behind Aizawa trying to help with his injuries. Oh, and Izuku was on fire. Tamura Shigaraki, we don't have the ability to take down All Might without the Nomu, we need to leave. Shigaraki growled and glared at the two muscled men. Don. Think'll just let you get away, villain. He dashed down at a breakneck speed, but before he could to them, the villain was wrapped in a purple mist and taken away. All Might clenched his fists but quickly refocused as he started running around the entirety of the USJ, bringing the students to the main plaza and taking out the villains he met along the way. By the time he was done, all the villains were defeated and all students were by the doors. Although he was concerned when he saw Izuku, all that remained of the hero costume were the trousers, but there were more like shorts at this point. His arms were barely recognizable, one side was mangled while the other had decayed considerably. His legs were no longer on fire but they were severely burnt. However, he smiled lightly as the whole class, especially the Yaoyorozu girl, was concerned about him. Momo was fussing all over him, creating bandages, burn creams and all sorts of medical equipment to help him, and he must be nearing his limit because he swore he could see a giant woman with pink hair standing behind her. As he was thinking this, the other heroes arrived with Iida and the police. They were expecting to provide assistance to All Might as he fought the villains. However, they were surprised to see all the students standing in front of them. What concerned them was Izuku, however, as they made the same observations as Izuku, not to mention the conditions of Aizawa and 13. They rushed over and picked up the teachers to take them to the ambulances waiting outside as police flooded the building to arrest the villains. As they went to take Izuku to get him treated, they noticed he wasn't following them. This worried Momo even more than she was already. Izuku, what's wrong? Why aren't you going with them? She got in front of him, but noticed something. He was unconscious. He had been fighting so hard that when he finally got the chance to relax he passed out, but even then his body refused to fall down. Momo flagged over All Might to help transport Izuku, as he's the only one big and strong enough to carry Izuku. All Might nodded at the young girl as he put one arm on the back of the boy's knees and braced his back with the other, then used the arm by his knees to cause him to fall back, allowing him to carry the boy to the ambulance. He put everything on the line, even going as far as sacrificing his own body for people he's only known for a week. He definitely shows potential. It was the next day and everyone was in the classroom, except for Aizawa and Izuku. Momo was looking at Izuku's vacant seat in worry, not even to Mineta, as he recounted his encounter with villains, how he took many down and used his sticky balls as lighting rods so that when Kaminari was held hostage could unleash his quirk and any lightning that came their way would go to the balls. However, her attention was drawn to the door that opened and two figures stepped through. Midoriya, Izuku, Aizawa-sensei, you're back too soon. Both figures were wrapped head to toe in bandages. The only thing different between them was that Izuku's head was the only thing that wasn't damaged. The old lady went overboard on us. My well-being doesn't matter and Midoriya is well enough to attend class. Well enough, my ass, was the thought that went through most of the class's head. Izuku made his way to his seat and gave Momo a bright smile as she looked at him with concern. Aizawa started the lesson as he got to his podium. None of that's important now. The fight still isn't over. Most thought that it was more villains, but Aizawa quickly dashed that. The US Sports Festival is drawing near. That's a super normal school event. However, after the novelty of the announcement wore off, some had questions, such as Jiro, is it okay to have a sports festival so soon after villains snuck in? What if they attack us again? Apparently, they think of it as UA showing that our crisis management system is solid as a rock by holding the event. Security will also be strengthened to 5 times that of previous years. Above all, our sports festival is a huge chance. It is not an event to be cancelled because of a few villains. Our sports festival is one of Japan's biggest events. In the past, the Olympics were called a festival of sports, and the whole country was crazy about them. As you know, with reductions in scale and population, they're now a shell of their former glory, and now for Japan what has taken the place of those Olympics is the US Sports Festival. The festival is also a chance for you to be scouted with all the pro heroes watching, and if you join a famous hero agency you will get more experience and popularity. Time is limited. If you expect to go pro, then the path to your future will open up at this event. 1 chance a year, a total of just 3 chances. Aspiring heroes can afford to miss the event. If you understand that, then don't slack off on your preparations. Yes sir. Homeroom is dismissed. The day went on as normal, with the exception being that Momo had moved her desk closer to Izuku's as she wrote notes on all the lessons for him. Soon enough lunchtime rolled around, but when they tried to leave, the door was crowded by students, which confused the class on what they were doing. So, isn't it obvious? They're scouting out the enemy. Small fry. We're the ones who made it out of a villain's attack. They probably want to check us out before the sports festival. There's no point in doing stuff like that. He then glared at the students in front of him. Out of my way, extras. I came to see what the famous class was like, but you seem pretty arrogant. Are all the students in the hero course like this? The one who had spoken was a boy of average height with shaggy purple hair and bags under his eyes. Seeing something like this makes me disillusioned. There are quite a few people who enrolled in general studies or other courses because they didn't make it into the hero course. The school has left those of us a chance. Depending on the results of the sports festival, they'll transfer us to the hero course. And it seems they may also transfer people out, scouting the enemy. I at least came to say that even if you're in the hero course, if you get too carried away, it'll sweep your feet out from under you. I came with a declaration of war. He glared up at Izuku. Him being the biggest target, thinking not only was he blessed with a strong quirk but also a strong body, although this was offset by the ridiculous amount of bandages wrapped around him. Izuku took no offense to the provocation. Well then, I can't wait to face you. Just don't chicken out when the time comes. You'll need to give it all if you want a place in the heroics course. It's not a place for doing a half-assed job. We'll be waiting for you. With one last grin, Izuku made his way to the cafeteria, the surrounding students giving him a wide berth because of his imposing stature. Momo followed quickly behind him. Only Momo and Izuku were able to get out as their classmates were harassed by the other students. After getting their lunch, they sat down at their usual table. Momo was the one who started the conversation. So have you got any plans regarding training for the sports festival? Izuku shook his head. Not really, I've got a week before I can take off the bandages. Recovery girl was apparently astonished at the rate I can heal. Without it I would have been in recovery for months. And then I'll be regaining all the muscles I lost at the USJ. Momo nodded along but got quite nervous when she spoke, but a voice in her head told her that it was going to be okay. Then see, can you help me train for the sports festival? I've never seriously trained before and I want to do well in the sports festival. Izuku gave her a bright smile before lightly chopping her forehead with his cast. You don't need to be so nervous. Of course I'd help you. You're my best friend after all. Momo felt a twinge in her heart in being referred to as his best friend, but that voice that had been there since yesterday once again whispered comforting words. Momo gave a small smile. Yeah, so shall we meet at my place? Tomorrow. We've been given 2 weeks off to train after all. Izuku nodded, agreeing with her. He couldn't wait for the sports festival. He could show the whole world that Sumo was back and it wouldn't go down easily. First I need to change into my workout clothes and then we can head to the training field. There we can do whatever training we want. Izuku nodded along. Sounds good. So the two separated. Izuku was guided to the training field while some maids helped Momo change. Izuku was guided throughout the mansion towards the training room and was in awe at all. He saw all sorts of things that the Yaoyorozus passed. Ranging from ornate family portraits, he felt like he recognized one of the figures in the picture but he couldn't quite place his finger on it. Expensive trinkets such as vases lined the halls, and there were even framed handprints with name prints that got increasingly large until he arrived at the training room, and he was amazed when he saw it. The room was like gym, track field, pool and fighting ring all rolled into one. In fact, it had multiple types of fighting rings ranging from boxing to even a sumo ring. That made Izuku smile. At least some people hadn't forgotten sumo. Shortly after Momo had arrived, and she was blushing bright red as the maids behind her were giggling while looking at the two. Apparently all my other workout clothes were in the wash. She then lightly glared at the maids behind her as they looked away innocently while whistling. The reason for her blush was quite obvious. Despite her hero costume being more revealing, she was still embarrassed by her hero costume being more revealing. She was embarrassed at her current state of dress. She was currently dressed with her hair in her usual ponytail. However, what she was wearing caused his eyes to widen. She was wearing a bright red sports bra with tight black leggings. I think you look great, princess. Let's just get tea training, musclehead. Izuku nodded. Okay, then let's go over to the sumo ring, and once we're there I want you to attack me. Momo was stunned at this. What? Why, you're in no condition to fight. We need to get you combat experience and used to thinking on the fly. If you can't keep up with the fight and get overwhelmed, you may freeze, or by the time you come up with something it may be too late. This will also help me see where your techniques and where you're at physically. But your injuries, what if I hurt you and make it worse, and you're not supposed to strain yourself too much? Don't worry princess, I won't push myself too hard, plus I don't think you could do anything to hurt me, and that's if you manage to hit me in the first place. Momo pouted as she made a bow staff as she charged at Izuku, but he just dodged all her strikes, moving in a strange dance. Stop moving, you musclehead, I'll show you how much damage I can cause. However, she wasn't able to land a single hit as Izuku moved around her attacks, although it was a close call in the beginning, but it was happening less and less. See princess, I'm not getting hurt and I get to practice my new technique. This much is nothing. It continued like this for another hour, with Izuku having Momo trying a variety of weapons against him. Currently, she was wielding base knuckles trying to get in close and hit him and land a hit, but she wasn't able to get in close anymore. She was panting hard but saw that Izuku suddenly stopped, so she went in for an attack, but as Izuku's eyes slightly widened, a red aura came out of him which caused Momo to freeze and start shaking. This is an aura that trained fighters learn to use. This is the most basic form, intent. It practically projects our intent to attack. The highest form of this is called bloodlust. Very few people can use it. Momo, who was still frozen in place, managed to get out. See, can you use it? Izuku nodded. Yes, I can, however, I've never really had a reason to use it. It's good to use in training because as you get used to higher levels you're less likely to freeze in any given scenario. Momo tried to nod but couldn't. Seeing this, Izuku withdrew his intent. I've gotten a handle on your current level, and so since we can't properly spar, as I can only dodge right now, we'll work on getting you used to intent as well as increasing your strength and working on your techniques until I recover. Then we can focus more on hand-to-hand combat and your dodging skills. Her eyes widened. That's why we were sparring for the past hour, not only for you to know my level but also to use different weapons. Izuku nodded. With your quirk you can use almost any weapon you want, and as Aizawa said, you can't be a one-trick pony if you want to be a hero. It's good to pick one weapon to be proficient in, but it's even better to be familiar with many alongside your main weapon. And so for the rest of the day, the two continued to spar, and Izuku would randomly release his intent in order to keep Momo on her toes. By the end of it all, Momo was panting, covered in sweat, and her hair had also come down at some point. She went over to the side where their water was stored on the side. She picked one up and started to down all of it. Unbeknownst to Momo, Izuku just watched her from the ring, a small smile on his face as he looked at her. Even though she was all sweaty and unkempt from all the training, in that moment she had looked more beautiful than she ever had. Smiling, he just shook his head before walking over to her. Let's call it a day, you seem pretty tired. Yeah, well, not everyone is a stamina freak like you, musclehead. Izuku chuckled. No, I guess not. Well, I guess I should get back home soon or my mom will start to worry. An idea then came to Momo's mind. Why don't you stay here for the 2 weeks leading up to the sports festival? We can train more without the need for travel time, and you can see my family's doctor to speed up your recovery. She's got a really impressive healing quirk. Many say she could have been the next recovery girl if she went into heroics. Izuku thought it over and nodded his head. Sounds like a good idea, but I've got to go home and grab my stuff. Sounds good, and by the time you get back dinner should be ready. And with that, Izuku, with the assistance of Momo's butler Alfred, made his way home, grabbed his stuff before heading back. When he got to the doors of the enormous estate, he was greeted by Momo and two people standing behind her. The woman looked like she could be a model with her long black hair that went down to her back and enchanting face. She looked like an older, fully grown version of Momo, giving a hint of what the future held for his best friend. However, it was who was next to her that made his eyes widen, because the man looked like many of his friends in his previous life. He stood at 7 feet tall and had a lot of fat, although he could tell it wasn't unhealthy. In fact, there seemed to be a lot of muscle, and while he didn't look like anyone he knew, he could immediately recognize him. He was a sumo wrestler, while sumo had fallen from grace and had been reduced to a small club with a collective of people that practiced it, and this was the man that used to sit at the peak of it before he retired 18 years ago. Akamichi Yayorozu, or as he was previously known, Akamichi Shuza. He had a transformation quirk that let him use his lipids to transform his body, either growing specific parts or his entire body. It was a wonder that he didn't recognize him in the family portrait. He's watched all of his matches, and he wished he'd met him in his previous life so that they could have had a match, although even now it wasn't possible. Izuku briefly looked to the mon's left arm, or lack of, he had lost it shielding a group of people from a stray attack from Endeavor. His arm been burnt so badly that it needed to be amputated. He was a man that Izuku had great respect for. Seeing him, Izuku bowed deeply. "Greetings, Mr. and Mrs. Yaoyorozu. It's an honor to meet you. Especially you, Mr. Yaoyorozu. I am an extremely huge fan of yours." This caused the man to let out a boisterous chuckle. Now, none of that, boy. You're a friend of Momo. Please just call me Akamichi, and it's good to see that there are still fans of sumo out there. Izuku stood up and flexed his arm. "I'm not just a fan, I'm a sumo wrestler myself." "Really, I've never seen you in any sumo ring before." This caused Izuku to chuckle and rub his head sheepishly. "Yeah, about that. There wasn't any sumo ring near where I live, so I just practiced without having any opponent to go up against." "Well, that won't do. When you're fully recovered, I'll get you a proper match." Izuku grinned. "Thank you." See? A melodious voice then interrupted them. Era, boys. I believe it's time for dinner, so why don't you leave this conversation here?" Akamichi, knowing the smile on his wife's face, decided it was best to listen to her and directed the present company to the dining room, where much to Izuku's elation was a giant hot pot. It was so big that it looked like it could feed a small army. Not much conversation happened during dinner as everyone was busy eating, while Izuku wasn't too surprised at the amount Momo was eating, as she matched the portion sizes that he had most days. And Akamichi was a sumo wrestler, so he could eat a lot, but it was Momo's mother that shocked him. She was eating way more than all of them. It's quite obvious which parent Momo takes after the most. After the four finished dinner, it was time to relax after a long day, and they headed to the theater room to watch a movie. "So Mrs. Yaoyorozu, what do you do?" "I know Akamichi used to be a sumo wrestler but now owns chains of successful restaurants. However, I don't know much about you." "Oh please dear, no need to address me so formally. Call me Kocho. You're Momo's boyfriend after all." "Mother!" shouted an indignant Momo, but the woman just laughed it off. "And as to answer your question, I created medical equipment as well as work as a doctor and model on the side. I come from a long line of people dedicated to furthering medicine. My Quirk poison creation helps a lot with this, as I can create even the rarest of poisons to test and use to develop new medicines. I believe this Quirk dates back to one of my ancestors, and it has allowed us to be better than most at medicines. It started with my ancestor Kocho Shinobu and her husband Tomioka Yaoyorozu." Izuku nodded along, finding this all quite interesting. The theater room they arrived at really deserved its name, as it had a giant screen. It was as bigger than any cinema screen he had ever seen, and there were rows and rows of giant chairs that looked extremely comfy. As it turned out, Kocho was a huge horror fan. Momo, however, not so much, so she ended up scared of every little thing, and by the end of it ended up clinging onto Izuku. She was practically sitting on his lap. The day came to an end as Izuku was guided to the room prepared for him and noticed it was right next to Momo's, the door of which had a sign on it, reading "Momo's room, stay out." The doors to the two rooms were a distance apart, which confused Izuku, but when he entered his own he could see why. The entire room was as big as his whole house back home, with walk-in wardrobes and bathrooms the size of the master bedroom at home. He couldn't even begin to imagine how big the master bedroom of this property was. Disregarding this, Izuku got ready for bed and closed his eyes as his head hit the pillow. Izuku was awoken by the sensation of his face being lightly tapped, and when he opened his eyes he saw Momo repeatedly slapping him as hard as she could. When she saw that his eyes were finally open, she huffed and tilted her head. "Good of you to finally wake up, muscle head." Izuku smirked up at her. "Well, why wouldn't I wake up when I'm getting such a lovely wake-up call from you, princess?" Momo just huffed. "Well, breakfast will be ready soon, so hurry up and get ready." When Izuku is ready, he to the dining hall. When he saw what they'd be eating, he wasn't surprised at this point, because in front of him once again were the giant proportions. This time they were having a traditional American breakfast with enough pancakes that if stacked individually could reach 1 meter for each plate. Izuku smiled seeing the food as well as the present company. "Good morning, Akamichi, Kocho, Momo." The three smiled at him and also offered their greetings before starting their meals. Before Momo started her training, she ushered Izuku to visit the family doctor, the granddaughter of recovery girl, Isha Shuzenji. When Izuku entered the med bay, he was astonished at the sight of it because it could be mistaken for a greenhouse with how much plant life was within it. He then saw Isha. She stood tall at 6 feet with a curvaceous figure, long silver hair that went down to her thighs, and shining obsidian eyes. She was dressed in a standard doctor uniform, a long lab coat and a stethoscope wrapped around her neck and all. "It's good to see you, Midoriya. I heard all about you from Gran. And I must say, I haven't met anyone who's caused her as many heart attacks as you have." She chuckled at her own joke before directing him to sit on the bed and gave him a quick check-up. "And what she's said about you is definitely true. Your physique is truly amazing. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it, nor muscles as strong as yours even in their current state. It's incredible, especially your rate of recovery. Now I wonder what would happen if I boosted that even further." Isha Shuzenji Quirk Transfer. She can take the energy of any living thing and use it to boost the healing of her target. She can even use the target's energy to heal themselves just like her grandmother. However, taking too much energy could lead to the target's death, with no direct drawback, but lack of control could lead to too much energy being taken and killing whatever it's taken from. Aisha's eyes glowed green as the plant life around her wilted and Izuku started feeling better than ever. "While I feel amazing, whatever you did definitely worked, Doc." Isha just smiled. "That would be the effects of my quirk. It's much more effective than Gran's, but it comes at a higher cost." She then gestured to the dead plants surrounding her. "It's why we keep this place stocked with so many plants. It's all to feed my quirk. Now, Miss Momo should be waiting for you. Still, don't do anything too strenuous and come back tomorrow. We should get you sorted in a couple of days instead of the week it would have taken." Izuku then went to the training room and helped Momo with her training. This routine continued for a couple of days until Izuku was fully recovered and all bandages were removed. However, his arms weren't as muscled as they used to be, but that was nothing. A couple of days of working out fixed, and so that's what the two focused on until Izuku was back to his normal self. And by the time that was done, they had a week left until the sports festival. It gave them a couple more days than if his healing wasn't boosted. Although there was one thing that confused him: despite all the work they did during the week, Momo's body showed absolutely no change. Izuku and Momo were now in the changing room. "Now princess, things are gonna be different. I'm gonna be attacking now." Momo gulped, getting a bit nervous. She had seen Izuku fight before, and it wasn't at the level she could keep up with. "Oh, come on now. Don't give me that look. I'm not going to go all out, but this way you can get more fight experience. You've gotten used to some intent, but now you have to deal with the attacks behind the intent." Izuku and Momo started circling around the ring. Momo's arm had been glowing as she moved. Izuku suddenly leapt forward, palm reeled back as he went for a teppo. Momo ducked and rolled out of the way, arms still glowing. When Izuku went for another attack, she finally managed to create what she was aiming to, a shield. However, contrary to her expectations, even though Izuku was holding back, her steel shield was still shattered to pieces and she was pushed back. She calmed her nerves. She needed to stay focused if she wanted to stay in the fight. Her palm started to glow and a minute later a metal bow staff was in her hand. She knew it wouldn't do much, but it was still good to practice with against an opponent that would fight back. "Come princess, you can't keep on dodging this as a fight." Momo just nodded and charged in and went for a strike, only for it to be deflected as Izuku went for a left-handed strike. Momo used the staff to send his arm off course and allowed her to go for a strike to the head. Of course, it did nothing in the end, but it was still a hit. This went on for a couple of minutes until landed a hit. Momo was about to continue, but Izuku just pointed at her feet. "You're out of the ring. Always watch where you are, otherwise you could be met with a nasty surprise." She had a solemn look on her face but nodded. She didn't even last as long as she wanted, but they still had a week to work on it. "You know, I'm confused about something. How come your creation is slow? I thought it would be faster for things like a pole. I could understand the cannon during the Quirk apprehension test and the shield as well. That needs to be the Quirk to be any use." Momo gained a sad look on her face as she looked down and rubbed her arm. It's just like that. I haven't been able to do anything about it." Izuku smiled at Momo, trying to cheer her up. "It's okay, that's what this training is for, and even if we can't get your speed, you'll get combat experience." And true to his word, the two worked out and sparred for the next week, getting Momo used to combat in different weapons in preparation for the sports festival. The voice in her head even helped her from time to time and helped her land a few hits on Izuku. She still wasn't sure exactly what it was, but she would figure it out soon enough. It was finally time for the sports festival and all were pumped. Class 1A was currently in the awaiting President Mike's call in the waiting room. They were just chatting and normal, with Mina lamenting the fact that she couldn't wear her hero costume. However, this piece was interrupted when Todoroki walked up to Izuku and stared at him. "Midoriya." "Oh hey Todoroki, what's up?" Izuku replied cheerfully. Looking at things objectively, I'm stronger than you and All Might has his eye on you. I'm going to beat you and show you that I'll surpass you all with only my ice. This just caused Izuku to laugh. If you really think that you're stronger than me, you're welcome to try, but you won't make it far with just your ice. Todoroki went to storm off to another side of the room to brood, but before he could get too far, Bakugo grabbed his collar. Damn you, Icy Hot, you're declaring war on the wrong person. I'm gonna kick your ass and prove that I'm better than you. Before it could escalate any further, President Mike's voice rang out. Hey! Pay attention, audience, swarm, mass media. This year's high school rodeo of adolescence that you all love, the UA Sports Festival, is about to begin. Everybody, is you ready? It's time for the students to enter the first year stage. With that, everyone starts to move out and head to the arena hosting the UA Sports Festival. Now welcome the miraculous new stars. WHO overcame enemy attacks with hearts of steel. As 1A made their way onto stage, President Mike continued. Anyway, we have the other classes 1B, C, D, E, F, J, and K, with the umpire being the R-rated hero Midnight. The other classes were still disgruntled at the lackluster introduction, while many of the men and even some of the women were staring lustfully at Midnight, who was the main umpire of the event. The class was also distracted by her and started classmates their teacher's form of attire. What is Ms. Midnight wearing? That's an R-rated hero for you. Then a cracking whip brought everyone to attention. Quiet everyone, Midnight shouted out while licking her lips at the end. Representing the students is Izuku Midoriya from Class 1A. Izuku looked around at the stadium and saw everybody cheering him on and let out a boisterous laugh, remembering Ragnarok, Full House, huh. Guess I'm adored by all ages, you know. This set the other classes off as they started booing him. Hey, calm down, I'm only joking. Izuku's face then gained a serious look. Today we are here today to show ourselves to the world. To show what the future generations of heroes is all about, and I'm not just talking about hero courses, the support course. Without you we wouldn't have our amazing costumes and support items. The management course, supporting us all from behind the scenes, and the Gen Ed course. There are many amazing quirks that didn't get a chance to shine in the entrance exam. Now is your chance. Japan is a nation of pride and honor. Let's show these virtues in today's festival, that the spirit of our ancestors is not dead but living strong. Now let's go plus. The crowd then roared to Liv finished the phrase with him. Ultra. His fist went into the air as he reached into his pocket for his salt before throwing it across the stage. I love sumo and I'm here to show everyone it's not to be underestimated. Sumo is making a comeback and I'll see you all in the arena. You'll need to give it all if you want to stand a shot at winning. Izuku's stage had pumped everyone up and endeared Class 1A to many of the students who hated them just for being Class 1A. Midnight then got things going. Now let's get things started right away. The first game is what you'd call a qualifier. Every year, many drink their tears here. Now, here is the first fateful game. She then gestures to a screen behind her. This year, it's this. The words obstacle race then appeared on the screen. All 11 classes will participate in this race. The course will be the outer circumference of this stadium, about 4 kilometers. Our school's selling point is freedom. As long as you stay on course, it doesn't matter what you do. Now take your places, everyone. All the classes then moved towards the starting line, which was a giant corridor leading to the outside of the stadium. The countdown lights started going down as everyone prepared to run. 1, 2, 3, start. All the lights were off, and with the announcement everyone started rushing towards the exit. Little did they know this was the secret first obstacle, as everyone was squished in too tight. Especially around the giant that was Izuku. Momo predicted the tight space would make it hard to move, started creating in advance, so when the race began she started shooting a pole out of her hand and riding it to make a distance, which worked out well because Todoroki released a wave of ice which froze the feet of the rest of the competition as well as the floor around him. However, Izuku was unaffected by this as the ice didn't stand a chance against his pure strength, and because of this and his massive size causing others to try and avoid him, he made his way to the front of the pack with Class 1A behind him, but he was getting further and further ahead until he was suddenly surrounded by robots. Obstacles have shown up suddenly. Starting with the first barrier, the Robo Inferno. Many were also left questioning the finances of UA as all the robots from the entrance exam showed up. From 1 to 3 pointers, but behind them was an army of 0 pointers. These robots meant nothing to Izuku as he just batted them aside, and when one tried to hit him its arm came off, and in a feat of pure strength Izuku just ran straight through one, tearing it to shreds, leaving many in awe of him. Present Mike seeing his performance. Hey, the first barrier was a piece of cake, then what about the second? Get ready for the FAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAA it, but before he could fall in, he prepared TP jump and let loose a massive leap, clearing the giant pit. You're gonna have to do better than that. Well, we've got something better. If you're not careful, you'll be blasted to Kingdom Come. It's the Minefield. Izuku just smirked and kept running, and ended up stepping on a mine, causing pink smoke to cloud the area. People waited to see what happened with bated breath, only to see Izuku keep on running. Izuku's smirk widened. He thought he was too heavy for the mines to blast him dar enough, and he was right. It only managed to push him a foot or two into the air before he continued running. So with a trail of smoke behind him, Izuku kept running, setting off more mines before he made it to the finish line, where he was met with cheers from the crowd. Izuku just smiled and held up his hand in victory. Izuku Midoriya has finished, coming in first, while the rest of the competition has only just arrived at the fall. And so after time had passed, the first event was over, with Todoroki taking second and Bakugo getting third. Momo placed in the middle around 23rd. After the 42nd contestant passed the finish line, Midnight announced the next event, which was revealed to be a cavalry battle. She then gave an introduction to the event. Everyone will be rated a certain amount of points, going from 5 at the bottom, increasing by 5 for each position. However, there's more, those at the top will suffer more. You'll hear this many times as you attend UA. This is what plus ultra means. Izuku Midoriya, who placed first in the qualifier, is worth 10 million points. Everyone apart from the Slayers started eyeing up Izuku and glaring at him, but they shied back a bit as he stood up proud and smirked at them, showing his might. Now I'll explain the rules. The time limit is 15 minutes. Each team is worth the total of its members' points. The teams can be made up from a minimum of 2 people to a maximum of 4. The riders will wear a headband with that number on their foreheads. Teams will try to grab each other's headbands until the time runs out and try to keep as many points as they can. Stolen headbands must be worn from the neck up. So, the more you steal, the harder it'll be to manage them. And the most important thing is that even if your headbands get stolen, or if your team falls, you're not out. During the game, it'll be a cruel fight where you can use your quirks. But it is still a cavalry battle. You'll get a red card for attacks that are trying to make people fall on purpose. You'll be removed immediately. Now you have 15 minutes to build your teams. Start. Most people walked away from him, not wanting to team up, but there was one person who wouldn't leave him. Seems like you need some help, Musclehead. Well, I'm not one to say no to a pretty lady. Welcome to the team. Momo blushed and huffed, turning her head to the side. Yes, be very grateful. As the two were about to look for more teammates, a voice interrupted them. Hey there, Mr. Muscles, it's your honor to meet me. Izuku raised a brow at the pink-haired girl, while Momo fumed at another girl calling Izuku Muscles. Don't you mean to say it's an honor to meet you? Yes, it is. I'm Mei Hatsume, inventor extraordinaire. You won't meet anyone better than me. My babies will make a fortune once they're on the market. Izuku looked concerned. Babies? Mei then held up a jetpack. My inventions, my babies. You won't see anything better than these. The jetpack then blew up, causing Mei to gain a sheepish look. So do you want to join my team? Mei nodded and joined the team. They still had another 10 minutes left to recruit another member, and soon they found them. Hey Mina, do you want to join my team? The ever-energetic Mina nodded enthusiastically. Bakugo just asked me to join his team, but joining yours seems much more fun. Bakugo growled his teeth in the distance, seeing Mina quit his team, while Mineta cried blood in the distance, seeing Izuku with an all-female team. Eventually, the 15 minutes were up, and everyone had formed their teams. Team Ishido. Izuku Midoriya, Momo Yaoyorozu, Mina Ishido, Mei Hatsume. Katsuki Bakugo, Eijiro Kirishima, Honta Sero, Ochako Ururaka. Team Todoroki. Shoto Todoroki, Tenya Ida, Denki Kaminari, Fumikage Tokiyami. Team Mineta. Minoru Mineta, Mezzo Shoji, Tsuyu Asui. Team Hagakure. Toru Hagakure, Kyoka Jiro, Rikido Sato, Koji Koda. Team Shinso. Hitoshi Shinso, Masharao Ojiro, Yuga Aoyama, Narengeki Shota. Team Kendo. Itsuka Kendo, Reiko Yanagi, Setsuna Tokage, Kanoko Komori. Team Monoma. Nito Monoma, Sen Kaibara, Shihai Kuwaro, Honi Tsunotori. Team Tetsu Tetsu. Tetsu 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 Tetsu, Jozu Hanuki, Yotetsu Awasum, Abara Shiozaki. Team Rin. Hiryu Rin, Jirota Shishida, Kojiro Bondo, Yui Kodai. Team Manga. Narengeki Shota, Togaru Kamikri, Manga Fukidashi. Mineta was further angered by how Team Ishido was arranged. It was Izuku as the horse, but with all the girls over him. Momo and Mina were sitting on his shoulders with Mei on his back attached by a harness. Think like a giant baby carrier on the back that allows one to face outwards. Geez Midori, you really are huge. I doubt anyone could grab me up here, I'm like 2 shojis tall while up here. Izuku just chuckled at her antics. Well, make sure to keep a tight grip. We don't want you falling off at any moment. Mina and Momo nodded while holding onto his head. Once they had done that, Midnight announced the beginning of the match, although Izuku expected more people to approach him, but not as many did. I guess they were scared off by his size. Well, that and the psycho inventor sporting a crazy look while sitting behind him wielding some sort of gun. However, Bakugo was not scared at all and had his team charge forward before taking flight and going for Izuku's team. You're going down Dekuuu. However, Izuku wasn't nervous as Mina set a blast of acid his way whenever he got close. And when he tried to go behind him, he was met with a blast from Mei's plasma rifle. He would have fallen to the ground and been disqualified had Sero's tape not caught him. Bakugo growled, aiming to go back at Izuku, but Kirishima stopped him. Bakubro. We can't go after Midobro right now. We can't get him from any side, we'll have to wait for others to go after him first. Bakugo was about to tell him to shut up, but since he was distracted he didn't. The 1B student who came up to him and stole the explosive boy's headband. Thanks for this, although I'm loath to have something from 1A scum. Bakugo's rage was immediately shifted from Izuku to this guy. Shitty hair, get that guy, and so Bakugo's team went after Team Monoma. Todoroki was the one to come after Team Ishido, sending a glacier of ice his way, but before it could get close, Mina melted some and Izuku shattered the others. Although unnoticed, Tokiyami floated in the air as Dark Shadow went for Mina's headbands but was interrupted as Mei sent a couple of shots its way. Which then caused some issues because the light caused Dark Shadow to react, which meant Tokiyami got shot and sent further flying into the air, causing Ururaka to panic and release her quirk. However, this presented another issue as Tokiyami started plummeting to the ground, which meant Team Todoroki had to move in order to catch him. Cause while it didn't matter if Tokiyami fell, it would put him out of commission and his quirk was required. The bird boy was met with a slap to the face, causing his descent to stop as he was now fine. This continued for another 12 minutes, with teams trying to approach Izuku only to fail in the end, with the girls acting as long-range support and Izuku taking down any who got close. There was only a minute left and Todoroki went for a final attempt to try and get Izuku's headband. Iida unleashed a special move allowing him to move faster than anyone could reach and dashed forward to get the headband. However, there were 2 problems. 1. Izuku was so tall and with Mina's added height it would be hard to reach the headband. Dark Shadow couldn't move fast enough to keep up with the speed to grab the headband and the wind forced him back a bit. 2. Izuku could indeed react, so the entirety of Team Todoroki was met with a backhand. Todoroki's left arm twitched before he forcefully stopped it, and because of this the backhand sent them flying into the stadium wall over on the other side, knocking them all out, but Todoroki remained atop his teammates and not on the floor, so by a technicality, they were still in, and before anyone could grab the headband the sirens went off announcing the end of the match. That's the end of the second round, the Cavalry Battle. Now let's take a look at the top 4 teams right away. In first place the reigning champions managed to keep their crown, it's Team Ishido. In second place, Team Todoroki. In third place we have Team Bakugo. In fourth place we have Team Shinso. These 4 teams will advance to the final round. But first we'll explain the final round before having a lunch break before continuing with the festivities. Midnight then sauntered her way up to the stage. The final round will be a one-on-one tournament and now we'll show you the matches. Before she could continue Ojiro raised his hand. Actually, Miss Midnight, I'd like to forfeit. This shocked everyone as they tried to dissuade him from this, but Midnight was the one who addressed him. Are you sure you don't get this opportunity often? It's your chance to get scouted. I don't remember much of the Cavalry Battle. I think I was under the effects of a quirk. I want to do all of this by my own power. It's all meaningless if I was under someone else's control. A boy from 1B raised his hand, wanting to quit for similar reasons. People looked at Aoyama but he just looked away and whistled. Oh so youthful, it's turning me on. I'll allow it. 2 people from the next team shall join the roster. After a moment of talking it was decided that Tetsu and Shiozaki Abara would move on to the next round. Midnight then gestured to the screen where it displayed the fights for the upcoming tournament. Izuku Midoriya vs Hitoshi Shinso. Shoto Todoroki vs Honta Sero. Denki Kaminari vs Abara Shiozaki. Tenya Iida vs Mei Hatsume. Yuga Aoyama vs Fumikage Tokoya. Mina Ashita vs Ochako Ururaka. Ajiro Kirishima vs Tetsu. Momo Yaoyorozu vs Katsuki Bakugo. With the matches shown it was now time for the lunch break, and before Izuku could get a chance to sit down, he was approached by Todoroki who wanted to talk with him. So Todoroki, what do you want? Todoroki just glared at him for a minute before finally speaking. I was overpowered, so much so that I nearly broke my pledge. That power, your power, on that day, I experienced All Might's full power up close. I felt something similar come from you. Midoriya, are you All Might's secret love child or something? This just caused Izuku to burst out laughing. Biwa ha 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 ha. Tears started to come out of his eyes from how hard he was laughing. He wiped them away as he started to calm down. Ha ha ha. Secret love child, good one Todoroki. Well, are you? Ha ha no. No, I just have strong muscles and the ability to control them. I don't have any relation to All Might. Since this was going nowhere, Todoroki moved on. Endeavors, my old man. I'm sure you know that he's been stuck as the number 2 hero forever. If you have any sort of connection to All Might, I'm gonna bring you down. My old man has a strong desire to rise in the world. As a hero he won a name for himself with crushing force. Because of that, the living legend, All Might, is an eyesore to him. Since he couldn't surpass All Might, he moved on to his next plan. Tell me Midoriya, have you ever heard of quirk marriages? Izuku just shook his head. Can't say I have. That thing that became a problem for the 2nd and 3rd generation after superpowers appeared. Choosing a spouse based only on strengthening your own quirk and passing it on to your children, forcing people into marriage, the old-fashioned way of thinking brought about by a lack of ethics. He is a man with both accomplishments and money. He won over my mother's relatives and got a hold of my mother's quirk. He is trying to fulfill his own desire by raising me to be a hero to surpass All Might. It's so annoying. I won't become the tool of scum like that. In my memories my mother is always crying. Your left side is unsightly, my mother said as she poured boiling water on me. Basically I picked a fight with him to show what I can do, without using an ounce of my damn old man's quirk. No, I'll completely reject him by winning first place without using it. Todoroki then started walking off. I will crush you with just my left side, so be prepared. You're going to fail, Todoroki. Shoto turned and scowled at him. Not just in the tournament but your goal too. You said your father's goal is for you to surpass All Might, so you made your goal to surpass All Might. If that happens your father gets what he wants no matter what. He may be happy that you used your ice to do it but in the end he won. You still surpassed All Might like he wanted. Shoto's scowl deepened. No, it's different. I'll surpass All Might with my ice and it'll have nothing to do with him. You say that but that doesn't mean it ends with you. Your father is still young enough. What stops him from trying again? Todoroki stopped straight in his tracks, eyes wide. What? If your father is so obsessed with this eugenics plan of his, what stops him from divorcing his wife and trying again for more kids? If anything, you plan to not use your fire may push your suffering onto others. Do you want another woman to go through what your mother did? Todoroki marched back up to him scowling. That bastard put you up to this, didn't he? He paid you to try and get into my head to get me to use his fire. Izuku shook his head. He didn't, and you're going to fail, Todoroki. All of us here are giving it our all. You can't get by just half-assing everyone. Will you be like your father and let people suffer and die just to achieve your goal? What will happen when the only way to save someone is to use your fire? Will you let them die just to keep your oath? Izuku then started to walk back to the cafeteria. Think on it. I'm hungry, so I'm gonna get something to eat. See you around, Todoroki. And with that Izuku went back to have his lunch with Momo. It was time for the tournament to begin and the crowd was alight with excitement for the first match of the final round as the present mic introduced the fighters. Here we have coming from the left we have the Super Sumo Wrestler. From the hero course it's Izuku Mafuria and on the right, we have the Dark Horse WHO played a vital role for his team in the second event. From General Studies, it's Hitoshi Shinso. Izuku grinned standing opposite ready for the match, and threw his salt in front of him before Midnight announced the beginning of the fight. He was glad he got permission to do this beforehand. Round 1 Izuku Midoriya vs Hitoshi Shinso. Begin, Izuku started to slowly approach Shinso. Weary of what his quirk would be, he probably should have talked to Ojiro but he got distracted by lunch and beating the shit out of Mineta for trying to get the girls to go out in cheerleader uniforms. Because of his current mother and the one from his previous life he had an extremely high respect for women. Sure he slept with a lot back in the day, but he was always respectful towards them and made sure they had a good time and felt attended to as well as helping those he lived in poor condition and used his substantial winnings to get a couple of them houses. Let's have a good match Midoriya. Yeah, he was then cut off as his eyes glazed over and he hunched over slightly. Shinso smirked at the now brainwashed Izuku. Now leave the ring. Izuku turned around and took a step shocking everybody. However as soon as he took that step his entire body convulsed and blood spurted out from all of Izuku's pores before it suddenly stopped and Izuku turned back around and faced Shinso. That was dangerous, you almost killed me. My muscles haven't run rampant without an ounce of control like that in quite some time. The 100 seals that he had developed still required some control to keep the rest of his muscles in check, but that had long since become a subconscious skill that he didn't need to focus on. But with Shinso brainwashing him he lost all control and when he took that step, his entire body would have been crushed if not for him quickly regaining control as his muscles started to crush him. As Izuku wailed towards Shinso the boy scowled at Izuku, typical. You with flashy heroic quirks have all the luck, even my quirk doesn't work on you. If it weren't for your quirk you'd be nothing, you'd have nothing, you'd be weak, without your quirk you'd be worthless just like me. Izuku just shook his head, waiting a moment before speaking so he didn't get affected by quirk. Even if I didn't have these damned muscles of mine I'd still be strong. I'd still have all that I have now. Do you want to know why? Shinso's scowl just deepened, while Izuku just grinned. I'm strong because I stand ready to run toward danger. I'm strong because I stand ready to protect the innocent and defend the weak. I'm strong because I stand where so few will. I'm strong because I do it with a smile on my face to let others know everything is okay and that I will not let there be senseless death in my presence. And I'm strong because I hold up the spirit of Japan. A.M.A. Sumo Wrestler. Credit to Pistachio Andy for the quote and while I changed bits of it, it originated from him. Both Shinso and the crowd were in awe of Izuku's words, as Izuku grabbed Shinso by the waist and threw him out of the ring. Hitoshi Shinso is out of bounds. Izuku Midoriya is the winner. The crowd roared in celebration of Izuku's victory while Shinso's class offered him words of support. Izuku walked up to Shinso and offered him a hand. That was a great match Shinso. You'd definitely be fit for the hero course. Do you know how many villains monologue? Just ask one question and they're screwed. Izuku gave a bright smile and held out his hand helping Shinso up. I'll be waiting for you in the hero course. You've definitely shown enough to get in. As Izuku turned away to leave he didn't see Shinso or All Might's smile as they looked at him. All Might looked at Izuku proudly. He'd definitely be worthy of one for all, but I'd have to talk to Night Eye first. Mirio is a good candidate as well. I'll need to wait and see which one deserves it more. With Izuku's match over it was time for the tournament to continue. The next match was Shoto Todoroki vs Honta Sero, however it ended quickly as Todoroki unleashed a giant glacier trapping Sero and freezing half the stadium which caused quite the interval as they had to remove all the ice. The next match was another quick one as Kaminari's electricity attacks were all blocked by Shiozaki's vines and because his quirk immobilized him Shiozaki was able to dispose of him quickly. However, the next one was the opposite of the previous matches as it was much longer. The match was Tenya Iida vs Mei Hatsume, and Hatsume used the sports festival as a chance to advertise her babies, so her match was a presentation that she made before this point. She even had Iida wear some equipment to show off its effect. However, once she had finished her presentation she forfeited allowing Iida to move on. The following fight was a surprise for all as Tokiyami was one of the people expected to go far with his amazing quirk. However, Yuga Aoyama vs Fumikage Tokiyami surprised many, and caused quite a few to lose a large amount of money because they had bet on Tokiyami, however he lost. This was because Dark Shadow couldn't stand Aoyama's lasers, which allowed the Frenchman to get in close and send the bird boy flying with his final laser. The next match posed to be interesting. TT was Mina Ashita vs Ochako Ururaka, and for the 6th round we have the Queen of Aliens herself. From the hero course it's Mina Ashita versus the Monarch of Gravity Ochako Uraraka. The pink-skinned girl was grinning while bouncing on the balls of her feet. "Let's go all out and have a fun fight, Ocha," Uraraka nodded. With a fire in her eyes. "Begin," announced Midnight as the two charged towards each other. With Mina sliding on her acid for extra maneuverability, which proved to be a huge help in avoiding all of Ochako's attack. With Mina's experience in dance she was able to move in flexible and unpredictable ways Ochako was unable to keep up, and even with Mina toning up the PHOF her acid it was still getting to Ochako. However, Ochako was finally able to get a hit on Mina and sent her into the air. "Surrender, Mina, it's over, you can't do anything while you're floating." "No way, Ocha, I'm not giving up so easily." Ururaka went to push Mina outside the arena but still couldn't get close because Mina could still spray acid. "I think it's time to show off a special move, Acid Tornado." With the help of Ochako's anti-gravity she could move around much easier, so spinning with a speed she'd never been able to achieve before, she spewed acid from all of her body, creating a tornado of acid, which started to destroy the arena, and the only way for Ochako to avoid it was to get out of the ring. Midnight, who had to jump back in order to avoid the acid, announced the results. Ochako Ururaka is out of bounds, the winner is Mina Ashido. The two girls shook hands before going back to the stadium. From an entertaining match to a boring one, it was Ajiro Kirishima versus Tetsu. With the two having such similar quirks it became a slugging match that lasted for 10 minutes and resulted in the two boys passing out for a draw. They would later compete in an arm wrestle for the tiebreaker, which Kirishima won. Now was the match that Izuku was most excited for. Momo Yaoyorozu versus Katsuki Bakugo. Alright, for the 8th and final match of the first round, we have the one I'm personally rooting for, the Creation Queen herself. From the hero course, it's Momo Yaoyorozu versus, he was kind of famous in high school. This isn't the face of a regular person. The resident bomber of Class 1A. From the hero course, it's Katsuki Bakugo. Momo looked nervous but she steeled herself as her arm glowed and Bakugo scowled. "You're gonna fucking go down, ponytail, and then Shitty Deku will be next." Final round begin. Bakugo began blasting his way towards Momo. By the time Bakugo got to Momo, her creation had finished and a shield popped out of her arm. She then used it to block the onslaught of explosions sent her way. She was hiding behind the shield but noticed she was being knocked closer and closer to the edge. Not wanting to be knocked out of the ring, she dashed forward, slamming in the face with her shield before rolling out of the way to get to his other side, before slamming his face once again, causing him to fly back. But he recovered quickly and used his explosions to keep himself in the ring and send him towards Momo. "You're dead, you bitch." He created a giant flash of light blinding her as her hands went to her eyes. He used this opportunity to blast her in the chest, sending Momo bouncing across the ring. She quickly recovered, having gotten used to much shorter hits, and as Bakugo got close for another explosion, as he raised his hand to blast her, only to be met by a pole flying at his face as he blasted the girl, sending her back. Bakugo was getting even more angry, and that only intensified as he saw Izuku looking at Momo with concern. And that's when a savage grin came to his face as he realized he could back at Izuku for looking down on him all over the years. "You're Deku's bitch, right?" Momo scowled. "Don't call him that, you bastard." Bakugo scowled as he started blasting himself into the air. "Then you're gonna take his punishment, saw him." Bakugo started to blast and spin himself around, creating a spiral of smoke around him as he aimed at Momo. The girl's eyes widened looking at the mass of destruction heading her way. She knew there was only one way to survive this. Her shield definitely wouldn't hold up and that would definitely kill her. She didn't like what she had to do, but it had to be done. Momo let out a breath as she felt herself relax and expand, letting go of her current form. Her chubby arms started to glow as Matryoshka dolls containing canisters popped out of them and started spraying a shit ton of carbon dioxide as her face glowed, forming a gas mask. The Matryoshka doll started coming out of her legs too as she formed a couple of metal walls before forming a riot shield and standing behind it. Soon enough Bakugo got close enough, and his rotation suckled in the carbon dioxide like it had done with oxygen. Howitzer IMAAAAAAAAAAACT, when he released his explosion it was much less grandiose than what he was anticipating. In fact it was just a big blast that was as big as the biggest explosion he could produce normally, and when he saw the riot shield he growled, "That blast should have blown her to Kingdom Come, but she's just standing there. That bitch." However, that's when he noticed something. There is a bunch of singed clothing sticking out from the riot shield that shouldn't ordinarily be there. Oh ho ho, what's this? He got close and blasted the riot shield out of her hands. He was surprised for a second before grinning maniacally. Well, look at this. You weren't just a normal bitch. No. You were a fucking fat bitch all along. Standing before him now was not the Momo Yaoyorozu that everybody knew. Now standing here was a fat Momo. She stretched her clothes to the limit, now looking like her father and his figure than her mother's. Momo had a mortified look having this form being seen by anybody, especially Izuku. She looked around and saw his surprised look and she couldn't bear to see what that look would morph into, despite the voice in her head telling her it would be alright. However, it was this distraction that cost her because Bakugo saw she was open and started repeatedly blasting her, not giving her a chance to react before she was blown out of the ring at such a force that she cracked the wall she hit, although Momo didn't think it was the force that did it. And now with her match over she ran through the exit, tears streaming out of her eyes. Momo Yaoyorozu is out of bounds, the winner is Katsuki Bakugo. Izuku seeing this decided to run after her even though his match was next. Although he lucked out, his presents mic rang throughout the stadium. Yeah, what an amazing first round. We'll have a 3-0 minute break to give our participants a moment to rest and for all you lovely ladies and gentlemen to go to the bathroom and grab some snacks, but make sure you don't miss the quarterfinals. The matchups are ones you definitely don't want to miss. Izuku spent a couple of minutes looking around for Momo, not knowing where she could have gone to before he picked up a faint sound. It was crying. When he followed the sound it eventually led him to a door leading to a room, and he should know it was empty. There were so many he went into while looking for Momo. He had no idea why the rat principal had these built, but he wasn't one to judge. The crying was even louder now. He even heard another voice speaking comforting words, and that voice sounded very familiar. When he opened the door he saw Momo. She wasn't in her skinny form but instead she was in her fat form now with baggier clothes. Her knees were curled as far as she could bring them up to and was crying into her arms with a spectral form of Thrud wrapped around her, hugging the girl. Although as soon as he appeared she gestured to the girl before disappearing. "Momo, are you okay? I saw what happened out there. Bakugo was out of line trying to unleash that howitzer impact on you. If you weren't ready he could have killed." Realizing someone was here and who it was, Momo flinched back and looked up at Izuku, a look of fear in her teary eyes. "Please, Izuku. Please don't look at me." Izuku saw the teary look in Momo's eyes as she begged for him not to look at her. He said nothing as he closed his eyes and sat next to her and wrapped his arm around her, bringing her into a warm embrace. He thought of saying something to lighten the mood but decided that it wasn't the time. "So do you want to talk about it?" Momo just shook her head as she cried into his chest. "You know, I don't care what you look like, to me you'll always be close to my heart. No matter what you look like, no matter what you do, I'll always be there for you." Momo's crying and sniffling intensified as she heard Izuku's words. "You. Sniff you. Don't mean that. Sniff, you're just saying that." "I'm not, and I'm going to show you that these aren't just empty words." He tilted Momo's chin up as he opened his eyes in order to look into Momo's own. How? Izuku smiled. "Like this." He then lowered his head and kissed her with all the passion and care that he could. Momo's surprise lasted only a second before she started to kiss back and she started to cry even harder. Eventually, the need for oxygen made itself apparent as they broke apart and Izuku could get a proper look at her. He really didn't care what she looked like. He liked his women bigger. He would have dated her like this or when she was skinny. "I love you, Momo. No matter what, you can take to heart that I will always be by your side no matter what." He didn't know how it was possible but she started to cry even harder. She was starting to reach levels of tears that only his mother could. "Why, you really mean it?" He hugged her tighter. "Of course I do. Momo, I love you and nothing will change that." Momo smiled as she steeled her nerves. When I first got my quirk, I started to eat a lot more so I could make more with my quirk. Although my speed never increased, I could make more complex things. On the first day of middle school I was enveloped in light and I looked like I did now. I could even make things at a much faster speed. People were shocked at first, but after that, they just kept mocking me and bullying me until they heard that I was accepted into UA. I didn't want to go through the same things I did, so I trained with my quirk thinking I could go back to how I was, and I was right. I was skinny and beautiful again. Izuku cut her off. You're still beautiful even in this form. You always were, even like this. You'll always be my princess. Momo smiled and continued, but my speed decreased again. That's why Aizawa was mad at me. I could have placed better if I was in this form. And now it's out there for everyone to see. Everyone across the country has seen me in this form. Izuku just rubbed her back reassuringly as he let Momo keep talking. That's my quirk. I call it form creation. It's a combination of my parents' quirk. It allows me to manipulate my body like my dad, and I can create things like my mom, although I can create anything inorganic from my lipids instead of just poison. It also lets me transform my body into different forms I have, although I only have two, and it's much harder to be skinny than it is to get into this form. The reason why my creation is slower in my skinny form is that my lipids are condensed, so it's harder for them to form together and then get out of my body. My parents have been the only ones who didn't care what form I was in. Izuku nodded along, finally understanding how her quirk worked. He even thought of some new application for it, but he saved it for later. Well, now you have one more person to add to that list. Momo nodded before she stood up and wiped her tears away. We should probably get going. Your match is coming soon. Izuku shook his head. I don't care about my match. You're more important to me. Momo smiled at his kind words but paled at his next ones. Although, are you sure you're okay with our class seeing you like this? I love it, but I know how anxious you were about it. Momo started shaking. She hadn't thought about it, and he was right. Bakugo's words still rang in her head. She definitely didn't want the class to see her like this. Izuku's eyes widened when he saw Momo's nails and had an idea, and what he saw earlier solidified this. Momo, I have an idea. I want you to channel energy into your nails like you're going to create something, but don't create anything. Momo, confused, nodded and did so. A pinkish-white light emitted from her red nails before suddenly the red started to extend up her arms and wrapped around all of her body as lines formed. When they had finished forming, the lines glowed as her body started to shrink down before it was skinny again. There, you should be able to freely manipulate your lipids all you like when you're like that. Momo smiled as she hugged Izuku. Thanks, Musclehead. Izuku hugged her back. He looked behind Momo and saw the visage of Thud, who was smiling at the both of them. He mouthed thank you before she faded back into Momo. He was glad his idea worked. If there was some sort of connection between himself, Momo, and Thud, then maybe Momo could manipulate Momo's fat lipids like she did his muscles, and he was right. This would allow her to stay in the skinny form all she likes, although he'd make sure she went into the other form when they were alone together. He wanted her to be comfortable in that form wherever she was, but he'd start with these baby steps before they started running. They had to hurry and heard Present Mike's voice. Get ready, folks. The break is almost over and we'll get to see the surely amazing match of Izuku Midoriya versus Shoto Todoroki. It's definitely not one you want to miss. Momo looked up at Izuku. You should probably get going, Musclehead. He nodded. I should. But I need to do one thing first. He picked her up and proceeded to give her a deep kiss. Thanks for good luck, princess. He placed her down before going off to his match. Momo looked at him with a love-struck expression before shaking her head and smiling. That Musclehead. I swear. She walked off to go back to her seat in the stadium. It was now time for the match as both participants approached the stadium. Hey everybody, we've got another heated, or should I say frosty match ahead of us. On the left, the wondrous wrestler himself. From the hero course, it's Izuku Midoriya versus on the right, UA's frozen prince. From the hero course, it's Shoto Todoroki. Izuku threw salt across the arena as Shoto spoke. You're finished, Midoriya. I will defeat you here, and show that bastard that I don't need his power. Izuku shook his head. Todoroki, you'll never be able to defeat me with just half your power. If you keep going on like this, you're just going to get yourself or someone else killed. And I'm gonna apologize in advance, I'm not in a good mood. So I'm going to beat that fire out of you if I have to. Shoto scowled and unleashed a giant glacier of ice even bigger than the one he used against Sero. It's over, midnight, call the match. The R-rated hero was about to do so as Todoroki started to walk towards the boundary, but stopped as he heard cracking noises. And then suddenly the entire glacier started to shatter and fall apart, and there in the center was Izuku with his palm outstretched. "You're gonna need more than that to defeat me, Todoroki." Izuku rushed forward and teppoed Shoto's chest, causing the boy to go flying. However, before he could go out of the ring, Izuku appeared behind him and repeated the process. Izuku was moving so fast that it looked like he was playing tennis with himself, with Shoto as the ball. The boy never even got to touch the floor as he was batted back and forth, before Izuku slammed him into the floor. Izuku stared down at him from above. "Look at you. You're pathetic. You can't even use our oh-so-precious ice." Shoto could barely get out a breath but managed to speak. I won't break my oath. I won't let that bastard win." Izuku then got an idea. He didn't intend to be so harsh to Shoto, but it was the only way he thought he could coax him into using fire, and it was clear that it wasn't working. But as Shoto spoke, he came up with a brilliant idea. If Shoto didn't want Endeavor to win, he just had to make it so no matter the outcome, Endeavor lost. Izuku breathed in a lot of air and prepared to shout as loudly as he could. "So that's it, you're just going to let Endeavor's abuse get to you? Those days he spent beating you in and out under the pretense of training. Those days he neglected your siblings and drove your mother insane. If you let all that get to you, he still wins even if you don't use your fire." Now Izuku was bullshitting for some of that. Even with Todoroki's explanation earlier, he didn't know everything, so he made some educated guesses on the fact that Endeavor was a shitty father, and it was known Endeavor had kids other than Shoto, but he didn't know anything about them. It was probable he neglected them. Gasps ran out through the stadium as people looked at the intimidating flaming figure of the number 2 hero who was glaring at Izuku with so much hate. If looks could kill, Izuku would be dead 1,000 times over. This, however, was not helping things, as it only made people believe what Izuku had said. Shut up, Midoriya. You know nothing." Shoto was now standing back up onto his feet. "Oh, I know nothing, do I? How about the fact that your so-called father purchased your mother from her family for an illegal Quirk marriage? Your Quirk isn't hellfire or heaven's ice, is it? It's half hot, half cold. If you want to shut me up, then you'll have to use your fire." Your fire, Shoto." Izuku put more emphasis on the last sentence, but it seemed like it wasn't getting through as more ice was sent his way. He shook his head and backhanded the ice, destroying it before uppercutting Shoto, sending him into the air. And every time he fell back down, Izuku caught him and punched him back in the air. "See, Shoto, I can counter your ice. There are guaranteed to be villains. WHO can do the same. Are you going to let people suffer and die just like your father? Are you? I thought you wanted to be different from him, not the same. You want to be a true hero, don't you? It's your fire, not his. Not get your fucking ACT together and show me your true strength." Shoto was extremely enraged at this point, and it didn't help that Izuku's words were sinking in, as well as the pain that was covering his entire body. It was all just so overwhelming that he forgot about everything, forgot about Endeavor, his trauma. He just wanted this bastard to shut up. Shoto let out a roar of his own before a sea of flames came out from his left hand as he got close to Izuku, setting the wrestler alight and blasting him away so he could land safely. Shoto was relentless and kept up the fire before a shockwave came his way and he had to dodge, and ahead of him stood the shirtless Izuku, looking completely unharmed with his hands clapped in front of him. "You're gonna have to do better than that." He then performed "come at me" gesture with his hand. "You're gonna regret making your enemy stronger, Midoriya." Izuku realized that the next attack would mean the end of this match, as both ice and fire were coming off of Shoto as he prepared for his ultimate attack. Izuku grinned madly, unsealing his arms and legs. "This is gonna be fun." Izuku decided it was time to show everyone a new move. Although since he had other matches he couldn't use this move at full power as it would damage his body too much. Just like Yatagarasu, he started running towards the ice as he saw the fire starting to follow up behind it. Izuku then jumped into the air and shouted, "Kinryu no Mai," as he then used Teppo to launch himself like a missile at the approaching ice, as the fire and ice came at him. Izuku bent his legs and released a devastating kick that unleashed a shockwave as Izuku collided with it, causing a massive explosion as the two collided. After the shockwave, an eruption of steam followed suit, not allowing anyone to see the result of the battle. When it cleared, people stared in awe at the sight. The entire right side of the arena was destroyed while the left side was both frozen and on fire. Izuku was standing strong. His limbs were bruised and frozen, with his hair was on fire, but apart from that he was fine. On the other end of the stadium, Shoto was embedded in a frozen wall, completely unconscious. He had tried to use his ice to keep himself in, but the force of Izuku's attack was just too strong. Midnight finally snapped out of her daze and announced the winner. Shoto Todoroki is unconscious and out of bounds. The winner is Izuku Midoriya. The crowd erupted into cheers at the amazing display of power. The medical robots came and got Todoroki and took him to the med bay. Izuku smiled, having gotten a good fight in Shoto to use his fire, although he scowled when he saw Bakugo, but mellowed out when he saw the look of awe on Momo's face. The following matches were once again quite quick. Tenya Iida vs Abara Shiozaki. As soon as the match began, Iida ran extremely quickly and pushed the girl out before she could react. Yuga Aoyama vs Mina Ishido. Mina's dexterity and speed allowed her to dodge all the lasers sent her way before showing Aoyama in acid, distracting him as his belt melted, showing the stadium his underwear, giving Mina the chance to uppercut him, knocking the sparkly boy out of the arena. The next match once again showed the brutality of the bomber of Class 1A. Ajiro Kirishima vs Katsuki Bakugo. As the match began, people started booing Bakugo, still angered at him for his previous match. The match couldn't even be called a fight, as it was just Bakugo unleashing explosion after explosion Kirishima until he could no longer harden himself, and after that, Bakugo just beat the boy to a bloody pulp until he was barely recognizable. When the match was called, Bakugo was once again booed as he scoffed and walked but to the stadium. It was now the semifinals, and they turned out to be the quickest set of matches yet. Izuku Midoriya vs Tenya Iida. Before the match began, Izuku threw salt and spoke. "I'm sorry Iida, but I'm gonna have to end this quickly. I need to teach Bakugo a lesson." When it started, Iida ran as fast as he could, trying his strategy from the previous match. However, it didn't work as Izuku moved faster than he could react and backhanded him out of the ring. Katsuki Bakugo vs Mina Ishido. Bakugo gave people even more reason to hate him as he grinned maniacally as he tore Mina to shreds. He swears Ua must love him. He's gotten all of Deku's friends for his fights to show them their place, and soon enough he'll get to show Deku his place as well. Before the final, Izuku was in the med bay with Momo checking on Mina and Ajiro. "Hey guys, how are you feeling?" Mina groaned. Recovery girl had patched her up, but she was still in a lot of pain. "I feel like I've been hit by a truck." Kirishima couldn't even speak, he was that banged up, he just groaned in pain. Mina then continued, "Make sure to give Bakubich a good beating first, hot stuff." Izuku smiled softly and rubbed her hair. "Will do, Pinky, will do. Now get some rest you two, and you don't have to worry about me." He then put on a manic grin. That bastard won't know what hit him. It was now time for the most anticipated match of all, Izuku Midoriya vs Katsuki Bakugo. Bakugo had beaten all but a few of the Sumo squad to a bloody pulp, and now it was time for him to face off against their leader. The two combatants stood on opposite ends of the arena. Katsuki gave Izuku a crazed smile as he spoke. "Time for me to put you in your place like I did to your pathetic friends and that not-so-little girlfriend of yours." Izuku was deadly quiet, but if anyone could see his face it would put fear of God in their place, as the whole arena felt this pressure, although Bakugo's grin widened as he thought Izuku was scared. Izuku stared up at Momo and gave her a reassuring smile as he unsealed his muscles. He would have liked to have thrud with him to give Bakugo an even harsher beating, but he didn't need that level of strength to take him down, and right now it was more important to him that Momo had thrud helping her. Luckily their classmates hadn't questioned it too much, considering she was back to normal, but it was only a matter of time. The few perceptive people in the audience noticed that Izuku didn't throw salt this time for the match, which just hyped them up all the more. The time for contemplation and chit-chat was over as Midnight announced the beginning of the fight. Bakugo growled, "Here I come, Deku." He rocketed toward Izuku with his explosions propelling him forward. However, he wasn't ready for Izuku to dash over at imperceptible speeds, and performed the Kiku Ikimonji, clothes-lining Bakugo and dealing heavy damage to his throat. The explosive blonde coughed up blood on impact with the ground as he started to get back up, but noticed one thing: when he tried to shout at Deku he coughed up a load of blood. However, he was cut out of his thoughts as immediately after he got up he was met with a heavy punch to face send him across the arena and hitting the wall of muscle that was Izuku's chest that had appeared just before he could be sent out. Just as Bakugo came out of his daze he was met with a backhand that sent him flying. However, he finally reacted in time as he righted himself mid-air and kept himself aloft. He glared at Izuku down at the arena. "You're dead, Deku. Your fat bitch couldn't stand this attack without all that shit and you have nothing. It's gonna blow you to bits." Bakugo started up his ultimate attack as he spun around, creating a giant spiral of smoke as he got close to Izuku. Howitzer impact. His palms lit up as he detonated a huge explosion. People expected Izuku to dodge, to do anything, but he just stood there and took it. No one could see anything in the smoke that had emerged after the attack. All that could be heard was the sound of Bakugo's cackling. How do you like that, you worthless Deku? You're just like your fat boy. The smoke was cleared by a gust of wind and Bakugo saw Izuku coming at him, seemingly unharmed by his ultimate attack. Bakugo stared into Izuku's eyes as the sumo wrestler lifted him up by his throat to be at his eye level. You know what, Bakugo, I'm sick of your voice. Bakugo writhed around and tried to get out of Izuku's grip. He tried to shout at Izuku, trying to tell him to fuck off and let him go, but with the grip around his throat, he couldn't breathe, let alone shout at Izuku, so instead he just kept blasting explosion at Izuku but did nothing. Izuku's grip tightened as he slammed Bakugo onto the floor. Bakugo just lay in the crater formed by the strength of the slam. He coughed up more blood and tried to scream at Izuku as he was getting up, but to his horror nothing came out. All the damage to his throat and gotten rid of his ability to speak. He tried to growl but it barely came out as he charged at Izuku. Izuku still had a dark look on his face as he grabbed Bakugo's wrists. After what you did to Momo, I think you learned the true meaning of fear. Izuku's arms started to bulge as he sent all the muscles he could to them, and it was in this moment that Bakugo began to feel true unadulterated fear, only now he started to get a mere grasp as to who he's pissed off. Throughout my life, I've seen you torment others just for existing. You've thought that you're God's gift to the world, putting others down while I've picked them up and cleaned up the mess you've made. I think it's time you suffer just a little of what you've done to others, what you've done to me, what you've done to Momo. Izuku muttered. Mid-air button. He applied as much pressure as he could and crushed Bakugo's wrists. Bakugo tried to scream out in agony as his wrists were pulverized, but he couldn't let out a single sound. Izuku released Bakugo's wrists, showing the boy's hands had gone limp. The bones attaching them to the rest of his body had completely turned to dust. Izuku then Sparta kicked Bakugo, sending him flying, and once again caught him before he could fly out. He then started beating him within an inch of his life. Finally Bakugo's desire to live overcame his pride and he tried to call out to surrender, only to realize that he couldn't. All those hits to his throat, he couldn't speak, he couldn't shout, he couldn't surrender, and so his heating continued. You know, Bakugo, I always wondered what would break first, your spirit, or your body. He then held Bakugo up in the air before slamming him down over his knee. The snap that came from Bakugo's spine rang out through the entire arena. The crowd was silent looking at this spectacle. Izuku held Bakugo up by his neck and showed him off to the crowd like a trophy, and whispered into the barely conscious Bakugo's ear, "This is just a piece of the suffering I'll give you if you act out again." He then threw Bakugo out of the ring, causing him to slam into the wall and spiderweb cracks to spread across it. The crowd was stunned into silence, unable to move until one person stood up and clapped, soon followed by the rest of the stadium as they roared to life, cheering him on. This is what snapped Midnight out of her stupor as she announced the results. Katsuki Bakugo is out of the arena. The winner of the town and the entire sports festival is Izuku Midoriyaaa. Somehow the people got even louder as they cheered for Izuku. The greenette left the arena with his fist raised to the sky before he faded out of view. Going through the corridors just before the 1A stands, he was met with Momo, who had leapt at him, wrapping her limbs around his sturdy frame and giving him a deep kiss that lasted until she ran out of air. That was one hell of a thank you, princess. Momo smiled at him. You've done so much for me, it's the least I could do. Muscle head. Izuku wrapped his arms around her and moved her into a princess carry and went to sit in his seat with her on his lap, where he was assaulted with praise from his classmates. He was stunned how no one seemed angry at him for what he did to Bakugo. He had given him a beating that live television had ever seen and people just cheered him on. He guessed it was a testament to how much Bakugo had pissed everybody off. Soon after it was time for the award ceremony, pillars started to rise from the ground, although, to everyone's confusion, there were only two of them, one reading first, the other third. On the smaller third-place podium stood a beaming Mina, who was waving at the crowd, and on the first-place podium was Izuku, standing proud looking over the crowd. Midnight was the one presenting as she addressed the stadium, and here we have it, folks, the winners of the US Sports Festival. Tenya Iida had to leave earlier for a family emergency, and Katsuki Bakugo is currently receiving treatment for his injuries. A mixture sounds came from the stadium, although they all agreed on one thing. the hatred of Katsuki Bakugo, they were all either booing his mere existence or cheering the fact that he was so heavily injured. Now to award the med. She was cut off as a booming laughter rang out. Ha 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 ha, I am here to award the medals. Midnight had an affronted look as she glared at All Might. You're early. You cut me off. All Might looked sheepish as he quietly apologized before speaking in a booming voice. Ha ha ha, now it's time to give these young heroes what they deserve. What do you think? An eruption of came from the stadium as All Might approached Mina and gave the girl a hug while speaking to her. You did an amazing job, young Ashido. You showed off your quirk in ways I didn't know was possible. I believe you're only scratching the surface of what you can do. All you need is experience and to build up more strength, and you'll be a force that very few could go against. Mina gave him a beaming smile. Thank you, All Might, I'll try my best. The hero nodded before moving on to Izuku, wrapping the golden medal around his neck and hugged him, although it was weird for him as he'd never hugged anyone as big as Izuku before. Young Midoriya. I'm incredibly proud of you. You've showed your heroic spirit against young Shinso and young Todoroki. You are a true hero. The criminals will be quaking in their boots the moment you get your license. I for one cannot wait to see it. The number one hero then turned to face the crowd. With the first year's sports festival concluded, I think there's only one thing left to do. Now say it with me, everyone. 3.2. 1. Plus ULTRAAAAAAA. Thank you for all your hard work. The crowd facepalmed as All Might said the wrong thing. Before All Might left, he whispered into Izuku's ear. I would like to speak to you in the teacher's lounge in an hour. I would like to speak to you and meet an old friend of mine. Izuku was confused but nodded anyway before All Might jumped away with a booming laugh. An hour after the sports festival, a confused Izuku walked to the teacher's lounge with Momo holding onto his arm. I wonder what All Might wants with me. Momo shrugged. I do not know. However, if you need me, I'll be waiting outside the room for you. Izuku hugged and thanked the girl. During the hug, Momo whispered in his ear. Thrud says she wants to be with you for this. Momo closed her eyes and focused in keeping her lipids contained as the lines over her body retracted back into nails. Both she and Izuku glowed, and when it died down, Momo was still in her skinny form with only her nails being red. When they arrived at the teacher's lounge, Izuku knocked on the door. It's me, Izuku. May I come in? All Might's booming voice came from the door. Of course, my boy. Please come in. With permission given, Izuku walked into the room. He was surprised at who was with All Might. He wasn't sure who this old friend All Might was going to bring was, but this wasn't what he was expecting, although in hindsight he should have anticipated this. Standing next to an All Might who had changed into more casual clothes was a tall, lean, muscular man dressed in a suit and standing at an impressive 6 feet 6 3/4. With sharpened features, he had a stern look on his face as he glared. It was All Might's old sidekick, Sir Night-Eye, and next to him was a shorter muscular blonde boy with pure blue eyes. While tall in his own right, he was dwarfed by the other occupants of the room. I still think this is not necessary, Toshinori. Mirio here is clearly perfect for it. We don't need to consider this fool. All Might shook his head. No, Mirai. While Mirio is a good choice, young Midoriya is an equally good choice. Night-Eye's scowl deepened as he faced Izuku again. Sit. Izuku sat down as told. The others then did the same. So why did you call me here, All Might, and what's Night-Eye doing here with this student? Young Tagata. Young Midoriya, before I explain, I ask that you not panic and keep what you see a secret. The two looked confused, but as they nodded, steam erupted and the skinny bony form of All Might was revealed. They boys exclaimed in union. All Might, what happened to you? The old hero started to look his age as he sighed and held up his shirt. I obtained this injury many years ago when fighting my mortal enemy All for One. And I don't think he'd hide AFO's existence here. Is there not some random kid on the street that clung onto him and he's planning on giving one for all to one of them, so he has no need to hide things from them? Night-Eye would probably want everything out in the open to try and discourage Izuku, of whom he doesn't have a high opinion on for the pure fact that he's a candidate for one for all. We fought to the death. I killed him. I caved his skull, however in the process I sustained heavy damage to my lungs and stomach, which put a limit on my hero time. I can currently use my hero form for 3 hours, but I can feel it. If I strain myself too much it will decrease. It was Mirio who spoke. All Might, why are you telling us this? The hero seemed to perk up a bit. I am telling you this because I wish for one of you to become my successor. Their eyes widened whenever I was asked about my quirk. I redirected it with a joke, but the truth is the symbol of peace isn't born. It was created. Long ago there were two brothers, one was the younger brother. He was sickly and quirkless while the other was born strong and had the ability to take and give quirks. The older brother quickly rose to power, however he went down a dark path, and when his younger brother tried to stop him he imprisoned him and gave him a stockpiling quirk to strengthen his body and turned those he supported against him. However, this would end up being his undoing because the younger brother did have a quirk. He could pass on his own quirk. This quirk fused to create the quirk I currently possess, One for All. It has been passed down for the sole purpose of defeating the older brother All for One. I thought I succeeded in that task. However, with the possibility of All for One still being alive, I need a successor sooner rather than later, so if I am to fall the quirk shall live. The two boys were absolutely stunned at this revolution. The idea that quirks could be stolen and passed on blowing their minds. So much so that they were unable to speak. I know that this is a lot to take in and for that I apologize. But you two are truly the only candidates for this, which is why we brought you here today. To choose which of you should get this quirk, and I hope that no matter who I chose that you two can be allies for each other. Guardians for the secret of One for All. I have allowed many trusted people with this secret. Soon it'll be time to build your own group of those in the know. Although for now it must remain secret to all. Night Eye then cut in, and I must reiterate. There is no need for this farce. Mirio is clearly the superior choice. He'd make the perfect symbol of peace. He's exactly like you. That is why I chose him. This fact shocked Mirio, who could only utter a low "What?" All Might only shook his head. Mirai, I don't want someone to replace me. I want someone to surpass me, someone different, not the same. So I would to ask you boys just one thing before I make my decision. Why do you want to be a hero? It was a shaken Mirio who spoke first. I want to save people. I want to save at least 1 million people. That is why I chose Lemillion as my hero, to remind of that goal. I need to be a hero so I can save as many people I can. I need to do this to save people and show people what someone with a quirk like mine can really do. All Might nodded, listening to why Mirio wanted to be a hero. Izuku answered after. In the beginning I didn't want to be a hero. I thought of being a sumo wrestler or something else. It was only when some kids needed me to save them from a bully that I decided to become a hero to save the people that need me. I was the only one strong enough to stop the bully. They needed my help. I was the only one he could help. So that's why I'm a hero. To save those that need saving. I feel that saving those who need saving is one of the coolest things. I don't want to be a hero because I need to prove something. I will become a hero to save those that need it. All Might suddenly stood up. Thank you for those answers, my boys. With that I can make a decision on who should inherit my quirk. I have decided that it is you, young Midoriya, who shall inherit One for All. Saying this, however, sent Night Eye into a rage. How could you say that? He's the perfect choice. Look at him. He's the perfect hero to replace you, All Might. Look at that blonde hair, the blue eyes, the smile. No one is more suited to replace you. That is why I chose him. Trained him to be ready for the day he'd inherit One for All. For God's sake, he could even pass as your child. All Might's eyes darkened. You really have lost your way, Mirai. The net generation shouldn't be a copy of the previous one. I'm nothing like my master, yet she still chose me, and you forgot the most important thing about being a hero. And that's the reason I chose Midoriya, is because Tagata is a hero because he needs to be. While Midoriya is a hero because people need him. That is what makes a hero. Do you all understand the distinction between the two? Izuku looked happy at All Might's words. However, Mirio wasn't listening to the words of the number one hero. It was what Night Eye had said. Sir, did you really only pick me because I reminded you of All Might? Not because you saw the potential in me, not because you saw how I could develop my quirk. Only because I looked like All Might. Night Eye nodded. Of course. Why else would I pick you? I needed to find the perfect candidate to inherit One for All and find All Might. And with someone who acts and looks so much like All Might, it would make the transition of one symbol of peace to the next as seamless as possible, as they could think of All Might when they look at you. Tears started to come out of Mirio's eyes. So I was never Mirio Tagata. The hero Lemillion to you. I was just some All Might look-alike. Mirio's ever-present smile disappeared as he marched forward and punched Night Eye in the face as hard as he could, sending the man flying before he stormed off. Don't worry, All Might, I'll keep your secret. A small smile. A real smile, not a front put up, appeared on his face, although he was crying enough tears to be mistaken as a Midoriya. And Izuku, congratulations, you definitely deserve the quirk. Just look at the sports festival, you saved two people who most didn't even need saving. As he turned, his smile disappeared, as he slammed the door behind him when he made his exit, scaring Momo, who was waiting outside, although Mirio didn't see her through his tears. All Might shook his head. You'll need to apologize to him, Mirai, you have seriously wronged the boy. Night Eye scowled. I did what was necessary. I will not apologize for that. Now on to a brighter topic. Young Midoriya, your performance today more than proves your worthiness to inherit One for All, and you clearly have the strength required. So now, eat this. He plucked a hair from his head and offered it to Izuku. What? All Might chuckled. You need to inject my DNA somehow. And this is much better than the other alternatives. Izuku nodded grimly before taking the hair and swallowing it. Only gagging slightly as he swallowed it, and shortly after he started to glow. His body convulsed and budged, scaring All Might, who thought Izuku was going to explode. But it was fine, as all that happened was that his shirt was torn of his body, revealing the Volunder underneath, which was flashing between 10 colors as verdant lightning crackled across his skin. This lasted a couple minutes before the colors left his body and floated in the air as glowing orbs. Leaving the Volunder its normal red, before that two left and formed a glowing orb, which resulted in the Volunder being a vibrant green. Beside the fact that it was now green, what was also noticeable was that it now encompassed Izuku's entire body. It's finally complete. Izuku smiled, but his attention was drawn to the floating orbs in the center of the room that started to circle around the room before they settled. 6 in the center and 2 by one of the walls. The final orb flew right next to Izuku. The orbs of light started morph and shift as they took on humanoid shapes, until they formed clear apparitions of people. These 9 orbs had formed ghosts, 2 of which shocked All Might greatly. One looked like him, but it was more spirity than the others, while the others just looked like see-through people, and looking at one he could only mutter one single word in his surprise: Nana. The black-haired woman gave a beaming smile to the symbol of peace. Hey Toshi, it's been a while, hasn't it? Izuku's attention was drawn to the only other woman in the room. Hey Thrud. How've you been? The Amazonian woman smiled warmly. I've been great, Raiden. There was never a boring day. Watching you all this time. Izuku smiled. I always knew you near somehow. Who would have thought you were inside me the entire time? However, Night Eye ruined it all. While all these reunions are touching, what the hell is going on here? It was the white-haired, blue-eyed one that spoke for all the apparitions, garnering the attention of everyone in the room. My name is Yoichi Shigaraki, and I am the first wielder of One for All. And as the 8th has probably guessed, we are the past users of One for All. Well, except for 10th over there. Night Eye questioned further. Why are you out here now? How is this possible? Yoichi gave Night Eye a harsh look. We have no desire to answer you. However, as the 9th and 8th would ask similar questions, so I shall answer anyway. When we were passed on to the 9th, we were hit with quite the surprise, as there was another person inside of him. And so One for All mixed with both 9th and 10th. However, since 10th was just a soul, One for All rests within 9th, but 10th can use it when she wishes, and because she's a soul, it has changed in a way we never saw possible. One for All was approaching the singularity point and would have unlocked our quirks at some point, but gaining 2 wielders at once, one of which being a soul, has given us similar powers to her, which lets us come out and wander the earth once more. All Might finally snapped. I didn't even know that this was possible. It's amazing. I'm just so happy that I can see you again, Nana. The ghostly woman smiled warmly at her old student. Yeah, it's amazing. I don't even need my quirk to float anymore. Izuku was the one to speak next. So what do we do next? All Might puffed up his chest and transformed into his muscle form. We train, of course. We've got to teach you how to use One for All, and you've got all 8 past users to help you. Speaking of, what's with those 2 doing an impression of young Amajiki? Nana waved her hand. Oh, those 2 sticks in the mud. Don't think 9th is ready. Night Eye cut in. See, even the past users agree with me. Izuku shouldn't have gotten One for All. It deserved to go to Mir. He was cut off when a black energy tendril came out of the bald ghost and wrapped around Night Eye's mouth. Now that's enough out of you. That's not what they mean. If anything, it's good 9th got it, because if that Tagata kid got it, he would have died, while Izuku here is built to take One for All. Night Eye looked aghast at the fact that Izuku was more suited to one for all than Mirio. How would the Quirk kill him? He's far better for it than this whelp. It was the ghost with a scar across his face that spoke next. I'm the fourth wielder. I spent most my life training one for all to improve its strength for the next wielder. It wasn't all for one that killed me, but one for all. You see, anyone with a quirk cannot possess one for all and live to see old age. With how strong it's gotten, I doubt anyone could last past 30, possibly even before that. Night Eye was now sputtering. But Izuku has a quirk, so he'll die. How is he more suited than Mirio? It was Thrud was spoke now. You see, Izuku was born with muscles that were too strong for his body and crushed his bones, so he developed a seal to limit their strength. And I am not a quirk. I am just another soul that was born inside Izuku's body. I am what allows him to control his muscles, and it's only recently that I could come out. All Might beamed. I don't understand half of this, but it's amazing that you're this strong without a quirk, young Midoriya. You're all for one's natural enemy even before one for all. You're so incredibly strong and he can't take that from you, so shall we start your training right away? Izuku shook his head. No, I'd like to decompress from the sports festival first, plus Momo is waiting for me. It then hit Izuku. Thrud, his previous girlfriend, was now back, but he also had a new girlfriend, Momo. Pre-Ragnarok he wouldn't have cared. He was a womanizer and he didn't care about that, but he changed after meeting Thrud. He had no idea how to go about this. Thrud followed up Izuku. Yep, I can't wait to meet Momo in person now, and there's one thing I can do that the other wielders can't, thanks to one for all. A glow encompassed Thrud, and when it died down it was revealed that she had a physical body and was standing even taller than Raiden. We should get going now, shouldn't we, Izuku? Izuku dumbly nodded, not fully understanding, and followed her out of the room, leaving just All Might and Night Eye. The last thing he heard was, "Sorry Toshi, since the 9th going we gotta go." He suddenly felt 8 orbs enter him. He shivered a bit, but stopped when he saw Momo, who was just staring at the two, slack-jawed, not having seen this Amazonian woman before. However, her voice was familiar, and it calmed her as this giant woman wrapped her in a hug. "Hey Gondal, you feeling any better?" Thrud, is that you?" The woman gave a big smile. "You betcha." In the flesh, Momo turned to her boyfriend. "What's going on? How is this possible? Does this have anything to do with why I got this weird feeling and my nails changed colors?" She then held up her nails, revealing that each one was a different color. The most noticeable being the green on her left ring finger and red that is on the right ring finger of each hand. Izuku just smiled sheepishly as he rubbed the back of his head. "It's kind of a long story, so I'll explain it to you at your place. We need to talk anyway." Momo nodded, ignoring the pit in her stomach that the phrase "we need to talk" called. Later in Momo's room. "So Izuku, you said we needed to talk." Izuku nodded. "Yeah. You see here, how do I explain this? Thrud was. Is, something, anyway she's Thrud cut him of seeing him stammer. It was sweet how he was trying to preserve her feelings, but this couldn't be sugar-coated. "I was his girlfriend in his previous life." Momo didn't seem so much hurt as she did confused. "Past life." Seeing Momo's confusion, Izuku explained his entire life. His muscles, becoming a sumo wrestler, being selected to fight against the gods in Ragnarok, meeting Thrud, and then his deathmatch against Shiva. That's when her eyes widened. "That's what my dreams were after we connected. I was viewing your past lives." Izuku just shrugged his shoulders. "I don't know what you saw, but if it's similar then probably." He then looked down. "But where do we go from here?" "Momo, I love you. I truly do, but I also love Thrud and I don't want to hurt either of you." Both girls gained smiled as they looked at each other, and they both took one of his hands. It was Momo that spoke to him. "To be honest, this makes me a little happy." Izuku gave her a confused look. "I was worried that I wouldn't be enough. That I couldn't make you happy with just me." Izuku tried to interject, but Momo shushed him. "I know it's my own insecurities talking, but I was really nervous when we started dating. I kept thinking that I wasn't good enough. And happy you've decided to share your past with me and talk about this rather than hiding it. And Thrud has already been so kind to me and helped as well. In fact, she's really the only one I trust with being your partner as well, and with a second girlfriend she can pick up in the areas I'm lacking in." It was Thrud who spoke next. "When we fought Shiva, I intended to die alongside you. You don't know how happy I am to get a second chance at life, and a life with you no less. I feel a special connection with Momo. She's like Gaul to me. someone I just want to spoil and make sure she's okay. And like her, she's the only girl I'm gonna let near you, and I've never had a boyfriend before you, so I too am happy to have someone else to help me in the relationship." Izuku couldn't hold back his tears and the famous Midoriya waterworks burst from his eyes and he hugged the two girls tightly. Allowing himself to be vulnerable for once. Thank you so much, for accepting and being with me. I promise to try my hardest to look after you two as best as I can and give you as much love you deserve and so much more." The two girls each gave Izuku a kiss on the cheek before deciding to rest and relax. They decided to snuggle on Momo's bed and put on a movie, decompressing from the stressful day they had. It was now the next day and Izuku was waiting to Koba Municipal Beach Park for All Might. The hero had messaged him. He wasn't sure how the hero got his number but he assumed Nezu had a hand in that. And that's when he heard booming laughter from above him as All Might crashed into the ground next to him kicking up a bunch of sand. And when it cleared, All Might was there in all his civilian-dressed glory. "So young Midoriya, are you ready to smash? How did it get like this?" Izuku wondered. The blood splattered around the alleyway, the wounds that littered his friends' bodies, and the sword headed straight for his heart as he shielded the bleeding Momo and Iida from a lethal blow. In this moment he wondered how it got to this point, how it came to this, sacrificing his own life in exchange for theirs. XXX. Izuku just gave All Might a deadpan look as the hero just posed. "What's wrong young Midoriya, do you not want to smash with me?" Izuku's palm met his face faster than even All Might. I. Izuku was struggling to find his words. Please never say that again." It was All Might's turn to look confused now. "What's wrong with smashing? I smash all the time. Just please, never say it like that again. Let's move on to the lesson." All Might just beamed at his successor. "Alright then. Let's get to it. I thought that his would be the best place to learn to avoid collateral damage, and I've had Nezu station some robots to keep people away so we can train without care." Izuku nodded. "So how do I use one for all?" All Might stepped nearer the ocean. "Like this. You clench your butt cheeks and yell SMAAAAAAAASHHHHHH, and as he shouted smash he punched forward releasing a shockwave strong enough to part the sea for a decent distance in front of him." Izuku nodded along and repeated the action. The lines on the arm he went to punch with turned green as he yelled SMAAAAAAASHHHHHH. The resulting shockwave blew away the sea in front of him causing it to part similarly to All Might. The muscles in his arms ached a bit but apart from that he was perfectly fine. And then he realized, he had never unsealed his muscles. He could have a similar level of strength unsealed when he's sealed. "Oh, this is gonna be fun." All Might, seeing Izuku's smile, laughed. "Ahahahahaha, and this is only the beginning. Now come at me young Midoriya, show me how well you can smash." Izuku just sighed. Old people. He decided to stay sealed to see how far he could push himself in this state and leapt at All Might, fist cocked back. However, All Might moved faster and punched Izuku's fist causing them to collide, releasing a shockwave kicking up the sand. "Ha ha 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 ha. I didn't think I'd have to use this much strength right away." Izuku simply smiled and channeled one for all into his left arm and punched, but All Might was once again faster and met his fist pushing it back. This exchange continued with Izuku changing which arm he channeled one for all in. However, All Might just kept outspeeding and overpowering. It annoyed him because he could tell All Might was lowering his strength in order to match Izuku's current output. Since that was the case, why weren't they even? Why was All Might beating him in every regard? Soon enough All Might got hits in against Izuku while the sumo wrestler couldn't even leave a scratch. In his anger he didn't notice his Volunder change from red and green to black all over as it seemed to come alive as black tendrils burst forth from Izuku's arms and wrapped around All Might's own, spreading them out, allowing Izuku to punch the hero in the chest, sending him back and causing blood to come out of his mouth. "I think that's enough smashing young Midoriya, can you please remove this tentacles?" The sheer embarrassment that All Might's phrasing caused him was enough to calm down and let the black tendril recede back into him as his Volunder once again turned red. What the hell was that? That's when an orange orb of light came out of Izuku's chest and formed the bald former user. "Banjo. Well kid, that would be my quirk, Black Whip. It responds to your emotions. We're lucky it didn't go out of control. I guess Tenth helped in that regard." The other users of One for All then came out of Izuku. It was Nana who spoke to All Might first. Sorry Toshi, but I think we should handle ninth's training from here. You clearly don't know what you're doing. All Might looked down. Sad that he had disappointed. That's when Banjo cut in, and really clench your butt cheeks and yell smash. What kind advice is that? Yoichi was next to speak. You say you don't want a copy of yourself, yet you're teaching him how to smash. All Might gained an affronted look, but that changed to surprise when he saw his own vestige nod along. All Might sighed. He really wasn't cut out for this teaching gig. He was actually the bottom of his class when he graduated. His grades were so poor that the only reason he passed was because of his strength in Nezu pulling a few strings. There was no doubt that he was a great hero. A good student, however, he was not. He sighed. So what's the plan then? Nana smiled brightly. I'm glad you get it, Toshi. Now the plan is for you to take him on as an intern. All Might gained a confused expression. But I thought you said you would train him, and that would draw too much attention to him. Especially if All for One is still about. Nana nodded. Yes, we did, but he's still your apprentice, so you do need to train him still. And Toshi, you did your job too well. You should have retired when night I told you to. The hurt look appeared back on his face. Not only did his master correctly think he wasn't a good teacher, but that he should no longer be a hero. However, a black whip smacked the back of his head. We can all tell what you're thinking, and that's not it. You've been an amazing hero, one of the best wielders of One for All. What she's saying is you've done your job too well and made all of Japan too reliant on you. If you had retired when night I told you to, the fallout wouldn't be as bad as it will be in the future. Yoichi was next. You're running on embers. Eighth, you won't be able to maintain your muscle form for much longer. Endeavor has been exposed by ninth, and my brother is beginning to make his moves. Faith in hers is falling, and without you there the system will fall apart. All Might clenched his fist. Then I just need to take him out before I retire. Nana shook her head. You may be able to beat him, but it's unlikely that you can finish the job in your current state, and with the League of Villains running rampant, there's only so much bringing All for One down can do. Once the pillar is gone, everything around it will collapse. All Might didn't know what to say to that, what to do. So, how do we make this right? Nana cut back in. That's where Izuku being an intern comes in. You announce your intent to retire, but do it at the same time as announcing Izuku as your successor. And while we agree that we shouldn't make another you, we make people think of Izuku as the next All Might, and he can work to make sure this doesn't happen again when he's a full hero. And as you go on patrol with him, this will help people think about your retirement in a positive light rather than a negative one, and once we get people to see they have nothing to worry about with Izuku being the next up-and-coming hero. All Might nodded along. Well, that's enough chat, let's get to training. The vestiges agreed, and the rest of the weekend getting Izuku used to One for All. XXX. It was now Monday, and the entirety of Class 1A was gathered in their homeroom class, all with the exception of one Minoru Mineta. This made all the girls nervous as they wondered what kind of perverted scheme he was plotting. However, their worries were put to rest when Aizawa walked into the room with a familiar purple-haired boy. Everyone, I am sure by now you're familiar with Hitoshi Shinso. He shall be replacing Mineta in the hero course. Iida immediately shot up, hand outstretched. Sir, what happened to Mineta? Was he expelled? Aizawa glared at the engine boy with his quirk, causing him to sit back down. I didn't say you could ask questions, and don't interrupt me again. Mineta has not been expelled but has been moved to general education on thin ice. Rest assured, if he keeps up his perversion he will be expelled. The girls looked happy at that, and Izuku was happy that Shinso had made it into the hero course. Aizawa allowed the class to ask questions and congratulate Shinso before he silenced. Now that's enough of that. We'll now be moving on to today's topic. He pressed a button on a remote, causing the board to shift and change, displaying the names of the class with numbers next to them. Hero Internships. Heroes who saw your performances during the sports festival had the opportunity to scout you. This is the first step in order to become heroes. You need to do your best, because if interest in you dies down, it's likely that even less heroes will want you now. He then gestured to the board. Usually it's more spread out, but these three really stood out. It was Izuku, Shoto and Katsuki's names which lorded over the others with their extremely high scores. Izuku Midoriya, 4,123. Shoto Todoroki, 3,556. Katsuki Bakugo, 2,234. Momo Yaoyorozu, 444. Hitoshi Shinso, 312. Mina Ashida, 267. Fumikage Tokiyami, 260. Tenya Iida, 110. Ajiro Kirishima, 68. Ochako Ururaka, 20. Denki Kaminari, 15. Honta Sero, 14. Those who didn't receive any offers can choose from a selection of 40 who have offered up their services. However, before you pick which hero you want to intern with, there is something more important to do. It was at that moment that the door slammed open and Midnight stepped in, choosing hero names. She then strutted up to the podium. Your hero name is one of the most important things for you to choose. It invokes images. Just a name alone can make the difference in brand deals and how you are perceived. You can change it later, but more often than not it sticks. You don't want to half-ass this like eraser head over there. The class snickered a bit as Midnight handed out whiteboards. Write your hero name on this and then present it in front of the class. You need to be proud of your hero name, so if you're too nervous to show it then you need a different one. I will also be here to veto anything that's too inappropriate, needs work, or has some other issue. What followed was 15 minutes of intense silence as everyone thought out their hero names. The first to step up was Yuga Aoyama. My magnifique hero name is, the Shining Hero. I cannot stop twinkling. Everyone was baffled that an entire sentence was chosen. Midnight shook her head. Let's shorten it to Shining Hero. Can't stop twinkling. That way it should be fine. Aoyama bowed. Merci mademoiselle. Suyu Asui was next. I've had this name in mind since I was a tadpole. She then presented her board. The Rainy Season Hero. Froppy. Hero. Midnight squirmed and cracked her whip. It's so cute. Approved. This made everyone worried as it set a higher standard, so the next couple minutes were spent rewriting their names. Mina Ishido was next and she peppily skipped up presenting her hero name. Acid Hero. Alien Queen. Midnight shuddered. Like that disgusting space creature. Bad image and rights issues. Denied. She cracked her whip and sent a dejected-looking Mina back. Izuku decided to send her some help and discreetly used Black Whip to deliver a message to her. When she read it, she smiled at Izuku and sauntered back up to the podium. Alien Hero. Acid Queen. Midnight sighed. It's a different word order but it's better, so approved. Everyone followed in a similar fashion, walking up and giving their hero names. Hitoshi Shinso Hypno Hero. Psychomancer. Momo Yaoyorozu. Transformation Hero. Kriti. Tenya Iida. Tenya. Ochako Ururaka. Uravati. Masharao Ojiro. Martial Arts Hero. Tailman. Denki Kaminari. Stun Gun Hero. Chargebolt. Ajiro Kirishima Sturdy. Hero. Red Riot. Koji Koda Petting Hero. Anima. Rikido Sato Sweets Hero. Sugarman. Mezzo Shoji Tentacle Hero. Tentacle. Kyoka Jiro Hearing Hero. Earphone Jack. Honta Sero Taping Hero. Cellophane. Fumikage Tokiyami. Jet Black Hero. Tsukuyomi. Shoto Todoroki. Shoto. Toru Hagakuri. Stealth Hero. Invisible Girl. Izuku had waited for everyone else to go before him. But now he stood proudly at the front presenting his hero name. My hero name shall be the Sumo Hero. Raiden. Midnight's brow furrowed before it lit up in recognition. Oh, like the famous sumo wrestler who lived during the Meiji period. Izuku nodded. Being a sumo nut, he researched this world's sumo culture, finding it similar to his own. Although this world's Raiden was much weaker than him and looked like a more traditional sumo wrestler, although what stayed the same was that they were both at the top of sumo. Exactly. I love sumo, so I'm going to take the name of the peerless Rishiki. Raiden. Midnight shivered, running her hands up her body before cracking her whip. So youthful and passionate. Approved. And with that, all but Bakugo have a hero name. Bakugo growled at the heroine. Apparently all his names included too much murder for Midnight's taste, so he currently doesn't have one. After most of the students had chosen names, Aizawa started to hand out stacks of paper. Some students only having a single sheet, while others like Izuku had a large stack. Make sure you all chose a hero to intern with by the end of the week. Next week you'll be spending the entire time with your hero of choice. Spend the rest of homeroom looking over your choices. And that's exactly what they did. Izuku already knew who he was going to choose, but decided to go through his stack to see who else had offered him an internship. Soon enough lunch came around and the sumo squad, consisting of Izuku, Momo, Mina, Kirishima, Ochako and now Hitoshi and Shoto, sat around a table for lunch. Izuku was the one who started conversation. So who are you guys thinking of interning with? Mina was the first one to answer excitedly. I'm gonna choose Backdraft. I want to find out new ways to use my acid, and he's one of the best at manipulating water, so I thought he could teach me some interesting stuff. And how I can best utilize my acid in non-harmful ways. Everyone nodded along, finding. Ochako was next. I decided to go with Gunhead. Just because I want to be a rescue hero doesn't mean I shouldn't learn martial arts. I need to be able to fight back in case I ever confront a villain. After her was Kirishima. I've decided to go with fourth kind. Izuku furrowed his brow. To his knowledge, that was a hero with 4 arms. He didn't see how he could help Kirishima with anything. Why? Kirishima hardened his arm and flexed while grinning. Because he's super manly, of course. Izuku shook his head. I doubt he could teach you much. I'd go with a more defense-orientated hero. Someone like Crust, for example. I'd take a look at your offers and pick someone else. Kirishima smiled at Izuku. Thanks for the Izubro. I'll look at the rest of my offers later to see if I got anyone like that. Izuku then turned to his girlfriend. So Momo, who are you thinking of going with? Momo gained a focused look that Izuku found adorable. I have decided to go with Uwabami. She's the highest ranking female hero I got, and I believe she can teach me a great deal about heroics. Izuku once again shook his head. You might want to rethink your options, princess. The only reason she decided to become a hero was to promote her modeling career. She rarely ever patrols, but she's useful in rescue operations. With what I've learned about your quirk, I saw you should see if you have Fatgum on your internship list. His quirk is similar to yours in some regards, so I think he could help you. Maybe even help you redesign your costume. Momo beamed and gave him a hug. Barely even able to wrap her hands around him. Thanks, Musclehead. He kissed the top of her head. No problem, princess. This action caused Mina to perk up. Ohohoho, what's happening here? Momo flushed red, and to save her from the embarrassment, Izuku redirected the conversion. Shinso. Shoto, who did you decide to go with? Shinso answered. Aizawa-sensei gave me an offer. Since I want to be an underground hero, he's offered to train me in the basics. Izuku smiled. That's good. It's hard to get an underground hero's attention given how secretive they are. So it's good you've found a way into underground heroics. And what about you, Shoto? You received a lot. Any idea on who you want to go with? The bicolored boy shook his head. No. I want to work on my fire, but I refuse to go to my father for help, so I'm looking for others who could help me work on both halves of my quirk. Izuku nodded. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I'm sure you'll find someone good in the rest of your offers. Shoto nodded, not saying anything else. The conversation moved on to other topics until lunch was nearly over, but the conversation came to a halt when Mina burst out. Wait, what about you, Midori? Who are you gonna go with? Izuku just smiled coyly and winked. I dunno, you're just gonna have to wait and find out. Mina pouted but let it go, seeing as she wouldn't be able to get anything else out of him. XXX. A week had passed and it was now time for internships. The whole class was gathered at the train station as Aizawa gave out his final words. Remember, you represent UA, so behave and do that status well. Make sure to not wear your hero suits unless told to, and listen to every letter of what your heroes tell you. If I hear a single bad report about any of you, it's triple homework for all. You got that? They all saluted and responded with a, yes sir. Aizawa smirked underneath his capture scarf. Good. Now get going, you don't want to be late. And with that they all went to get their trains, and as Izuku was leaving to catch a train to Tokyo, he saw the dark look on Iida's face, but he wasn't close enough to the boy to approach him, something he would come to sorely regret later. The train finally stopped in Tokyo and Izuku stepped out and approached Might Tower to start his internship. Might Tower was a massive red and gold skyscraper that pierced the sky overlooking the entirety of Tokyo. It was taller than any building in the city, with many different ledges warping around it. It was in fact the second tallest building in all of Japan. The only building that was taller than it was the Endeavor Agency. Izuku smiled looking up at it. He had admired All Might when he was younger. He never thought he'd get a chance to enter it. A gigantic fence surrounded the skyscraper to keep the sea of reporters out. Many reporters came here on a daily basis to try and get even the smallest scoop on the #1 hero. There were 2 gates by the front entrance, one smaller one for normal people, and next to it was a golden gate. It was known as the Gate of Might, one that only opened for All Might. So the reporters were extremely surprised when they saw a UA student walk up to it and it actually opened. They were so stunned in fact that they didn't have a chance to rush over and question Izuku before the gates closed behind him. This was a plan cooked up by the Vestiges to draw attention to Izuku and away from All Might. A few reporters, however, were already inside the building having pre-arranged appointments and were speaking to members of Start, and were mesmerized by the sight of All Might coming down his personal Might stairs to greet Izuku coming through the Might door. They met in the center of the lobby by the giant All Might statue. "Izuku, my boy, it's great to see you." An audible sound boomed across the lobby as their hands met in a firm handshake. Their eyes were met with a flash as the people around them started taking pictures. All Might placed Izuku's hand and guided him up the Might stairs. "We have much to do today, so let's get going." People were going crazy seeing this, because even when Night Eye came to the Might Tower even he didn't go up the Might stairs. Now some random kid from UA was getting to go up those prestigious steps. Just who was this boy? When they made it inside the Might office, All Might explained Izuku's schedule. In the morning it would be training with him and the Vestiges, although it would mainly be him giving advice in his skinny form. After that it would be patrolling around Tokyo as well as different areas of the country. The evening would have Izuku working the employees teaching Izuku how to do paperwork. After the morning training, they were now standing on the Might ledge at the top of the building looking down at Tokyo. They could just barely make out the reporters outside the gate going crazy trying to find another way in. It was like a feeding frenzy, especially when articles about Izuku going through the Might gate and up the Might stairs quickly spread. However, they were soon noticed. "Well, my boy, it's time you learned how to jump." Izuku looked at him confused before All Might boomed out, "Try your best to keep up, Raiden." Izuku straightened up noticing the use of his hero name. All Might then leapt off the building heading for another with Izuku following close behind. All Might landed gracefully on an adjacent building not causing any damage. Izuku however was coming down with enough force to completely destroy it. All Might was prepared to catch him. However, Izuku's Volunder glowed white and he suddenly stopped just before he hit the roof, kicking up a cloud of dust. Other than that, the building was unharmed. "Cutting it close there, Raiden." It was then that Nana's vestige came out. Of course he was cutting it close, he didn't know what he was doing. How do you expect someone to perfectly replicate something they've ever done before just by seeing you jump? Not even land. All he saw was you jumping. "If I hadn't activated my quirk, the entire building would have collapsed." All Might looked sheepish. "I taught you much better how to do it. I explained it to you multiple times. Had you watched me do it repeatedly, and most importantly I didn't have you start by jumping off one of Japan's tallest buildings." Nana then gained a warm smile. "Honestly, Toshi, what am I gonna do with you?" All Might smiled. His teacher was the same even after all these years. She used to say it all the time to him when she was still alive. It was good to hear that phrase again. She then turned to Izuku. "And you, Izuku, shouldn't have been so reckless to just jump in and follow him like that. What if you had gotten hurt?" Honestly, she shook her head before bringing the two into a hug. "Really? What am I gonna do with my two knuckleheads?" Izuku smiled. It was like having another mother, watching over him, making sure he was okay. He liked this. The rest of the day was spent patrolling and practicing jumping from building to building. Of course, they had to be careful not to fully use up all of All Might's time, so he was in his skinny form a lot of the time and only muscled up in front of the public. To save All Might his time in his muscle form, Izuku strapped him to his back using Black Whip and then jumped from building to building with Nana's guidance. This allowed them to last longer than All Might's limited time. After patrol, it was working with All Might's office workers to learn how to do paperwork effectively, because when starting out it was unlikely that he would have people to do it for him, so it was important that he learnt the ins and outs of the legal side of heroics. It was the next day and Izuku and All Might, both in their hero costumes, were standing on a ledge atop Might Towers before jumping down onto a stage in front of a sea of reporters. "Ha ha 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 ha, we are here for a press conference, and I thank you all for attending. And I request that you save all questions for the end." All Might quietened the crowd and began his speech. "It is with a heavy heart that I must announce something today." The reporters shuffled in closer in hopes of getting a better shot and chance of being chosen for the questions that would be soon to come. It's not often you saw All Might as sad as he currently was. "The purpose of this press conference is two purposes, and one of those is to announce my impending retirement." Despite his earlier request, the reporters just couldn't keep quiet and erupted into questions. Some even just broke down crying, begging for him to stay as a hero. All Might clapped in the air, releasing a light shockwave that silenced everyone. "I do believe I asked everyone to save questions till the end, did I not?" The reporters guiltily nodded. Now about my retirement. I'm sure you all have many questions, but let me say this first. I have loved being the symbol of peace, the pillar for Japan. But I am getting old and tired. I'm not as strong as I used to be. I have been a hero for just over 50 years, my time has come and gone. I love saving people with all my heart, which is why I have delayed this as much as possible. I've pushed past all my injuries and pushed my body far beyond its limits to keep being a hero. But it's just not possible anymore. I'm slowing down, so it's with a heavy heart that I announce that I am retiring. I will now take questions. The reporters once again erupted in questions and All Might started choosing them at random. All Might the questions coming his way. Some common ones were questions on his retirement and when he would officially retiring. I'm getting old and tired. I've been a hero for so long, it's time I retire. And I won't be retiring right away, but I will be reducing my hours spent patrolling and being a hero massively. I instead will be focusing on my career as a teacher, raising the next generation of heroes. He then pointed at another reporter. You, with the purple hair and blue skin. The woman smiled seductively up at All Might, glad it was finally her turn. Chito's Kazuki here from Shueisha Publishing. Chito's is a woman with long, pale lilac hair, worn parted to her right side, full lips and pale blue skin. Her sclerae are completely black, whereas her irises are green, while her pupils are completely black. She was wearing gold earrings, a navy blue, shoulderless dress with long sleeves and an X-shaped belt with a circular buckle around her waist. So All Might, now that you are retiring, will you finally be revealing your powers? And does it have anything to do with the young man beside you? The rest of the reporters widened their eyes at the fact they may get the answer to one of the most talked about questions in Japan. He was so mysterious about it that it couldn't just be a simple strength enhancement, and many only just realized Izuku's presence, which they didn't know how they ignored him. He was taller and more muscled than All Might, for God's sake. Haha, my Quirk, you say? Well, it's got nothing to do with this young man, but that does bring me to the next part, and that is to announce my successor, the one whom I shall bequeath everything to. You may know him from his amazing performance at the sports festival, but I would like to introduce to the world the sumo hero, Raiden. Questions once again burst forth from the crowd. Izuku stepped forward, crackling with green lightning as he secretly unsealed his muscles. He then held out his hand and flexed it, sending out a small shockwave which removed all the sound in the immediate area. It was something he learned to do after learning of the side effects of Yatagarasu, but this time instead of it being a side effect, it was the main effect. It was much harder to do before One for All, but now he used it to enhance himself even further so that even flexing could release a shockwave, although it had to be a conscious effort to cause it. Just regularly flexing did nothing, and although it caused a sound removing shockwave and it didn't do it to the same length as the Yatagarasu, it only did it in a small area. This show of strength stunned the crowd into silence. He had just flexed the sound out of the area. Not even All Might had done that before. They were in such awe that even when sound came back, nothing could be heard. Izuku pulled back the lightning and sealed his muscles, as All Might said. I am his successor. I am the sumo hero. Raiden, I know I'm not perfect, no one is. Not even All Might, but I swear to do my best to save those in need. To be there for those who have no one. I shall be the best hero I can be. His speech inspired the crowd and they started asking questions. Will you be taking up the mantle of the symbol of peace? Izuku shook his head. I do not aim to be exactly like my master. I aim to be different. To be the symbol of peace was his dream. I instead have my own values and dreams. I shall become the spirit of Japan. I will embody all that makes us Japanese and show it to the world. Our pride, our honor, our traditions. I will show the world what Japan is made of. The reporter smiled, as the camera came out of his arm and he took Izuku's picture. This would definitely make a good article. Izuku went round answering questions until he too called on the woman in the front. Miss Kazuki, what would be your question? What are your abilities, and what about them makes you think that you could replace the symbol of peace? Izuku shook his head. I don't intend to replace All Might. All Might left behind a great legacy that I won't replace, but I will surpass him. He has become the sole pillar holding up Japan, and soon that pillar will come down. What I will do is raise multiple pillars instead. So when one falls, there will be others to hold Japan up. You may not trust my words, but trust my actions. I may be a student now, but just watch me and my friends and we will show you all just who the symbol of peace is, entrusting his legacy to. Thank you all for your time. Izuku dismissed them all as he and All Might leapt into the sky. The following evening saw Izuku and All Might were now on a train headed to Hosu. The entire day so far had been spent dealing with the fallout of yesterday's conference. Izuku had received many comments, some cursing him out for daring to buy the symbol of Peace's successor and trying to replace him. Other hating on him for what he said about All Might. His biggest detractor went by the name Blood_Sword, however all their hate was crushed by the support he got. His social media had seen a rapid increase in followers far surpassing what he received after the sports festival. Many people thanked him for being All Might's successor and looking after the symbol in his old age. The two were currently talking in a private booth on a bullet train. Izuku had to deal with people swarming him, but they allowed Skeleton All Might to sneak on board and get to their booth. So Toshinori-sensei, why are we headed to Hosu? All Might, skinny form, looked at Izuku. We didn't patrol today and that's because we're doing night patrols. I don't do it often but it happens on occasion. It's good for you to learn the difference between the two. Second, the most important reason, gut feeling. Sometimes in heroics you won't have information or you'll have limited time to act. So you have to go on instincts. You get better gut feelings the more you build up experience. And I have a feeling something is going to happen in Hosu, which is why. He was cut off when Izuku glowed orange and shouted out, "Everybody get down," and he tackled Toshinori to the ground and his entire arm turned black and extended into whips to smash through the booth and wrap around any surrounding people, in order to bring the other passengers down with him, causing the talon that came crashing through the train to miss Toshinori's head and the debris to miss the passengers. When the two got up, a chill went up their spines as they saw a creature that looked eerily similar to the one Izuku fought against at the USJ. Since All Might was hidden by Izuku's form, so no one noticed as he quickly buffed up and punched the Nomu out of the train carriage. Ah ha 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 ha, everything's all right now. Why? Because we are here. Good job on getting people down, Raiden. Izuku smiled as he stood back up. It was no problem, All Might. All Might looked at the city below, seeing that it was on fire. Our work is not done here, Raiden. I give you permission to use your quirk. Save anyone you can and take down any villains that you meet. Seeing how urgent the situation was, Izuku unsealed his muscles and leapt out the train with All Might. They decided to split up in order to cover more ground. Both All Might and Izuku ran around Hosu helping put out fires, save people and take out Nomu. However, Izuku came to a halt when he heard a hero crying out, "Tenya! God's damn it, Tenya, where are you?" Izuku's eyes widened hearing Ida's name being called out, and that's when everything clicked in his brain. Ida's dark mood, his attitude shift, his brother being attacked by Stain. Iida was going after Stain. Izuku ran up to the hero calling out for Iida. He didn't recognize the hero but saw he was using water to put the fires out. "You there, hero?" The water hero turned to face Izuku. You're All Might's successor, Raiden, right?" Izuku nodded. "I'll look for Tenya. He's a classmate of mine. You just focus on putting out all the fire. I will find your intern manual, and I leave him to you. I'll give you permission to use your quirk. This'll let me focus on the fires." Izuku nodded and ran off, saving all the people he could along the way while checking down all the alleyways and back streets, garnering a lot of attention, something that he didn't notice. It took some time but he eventually was able to track Iida down, and it seemed as if he arrived just in time, as in the alleyway was Iida and the pro-hero native, both bleeding out on the ground. Stain stood over Iida, sword raised, about to stab into the student's chest. Izuku charged in without thinking, and slammed his palm into the villain's chest, sending him flying. He quickly used his phone to share his location so All Might could find him when he was finished with the Nomu. Hopefully this wouldn't take too long. "Iida, are you okay?" However, Izuku didn't receive a warm response. "Midoriya, you bastard, this is my fight. You should stay the fuck out of it. I had him right where I wanted him." Izuku scowled at his classmate. "Tenya, what the fuck is wrong with you? Going after Stain like this? Are you trying to get yourself killed?" The prone boy's scowl deepened even further. "He destroyed my brother's career. I'm going to get my vengeance against this man. Who crippled my brother. This has nothing to do with you. We're not even close enough to call me by my given name." Izuku picked the boy up and stared him in the eyes. "Like hell it does. I'm not letting one of my classmates run off and die to someone even pro-heroes like your brother couldn't take down. We're heroes in training. That's why I'm gonna pull your ass out of this mess you put yourself in, and I'm not calling you by your given name. I'm calling you your hero name, jackass." Before Tenya could give a rebuttal, a knife flew past Raiden, barely missing his face. Raiden then dodged an incoming sword strike from Stain. He then jumped back and placed Tenya on the ground so he could offer his full focus to the fight. Stain didn't attack again but instead narrowed his eyes. "Oh. It's you, All Might's successor. All Might may have acknowledged you. But I refuse to acknowledge you as the next symbol of peace. You are not worthy of that mantle, you are not worthy to be a hero. I saw your performance at the sports festival, brutalizing that student. All for the sake of revenge for what he did for your friends. You know better than this scum here." He then pointed his sword at Tenya, "Trying to kill me because I crippled Ingenium. He's not suited to be a hero, heroes don't take revenge. I don't get what All Might sees in you, but I'll make sure that there's not much to see after this." It was after this that Stain started to bounce from wall to wall within the alleyway in an effort to confuse Raiden. And it worked. Raiden always fought opponents head-on. In both lives he's never gone against an opponent like Stain before, and he couldn't unseal his muscles, or use one for all because either could cause too much collateral damage, which could kill the surrounding civilians walking the streets as well as Tenya and Native who were right behind him. Despite all this, however, he did have one advantage. As Stain's sword neared Raiden's back, his Volunder glowed orange and he tilted to the side, narrowly dodging the blade. Danger sense that was his advantage. He could only use one quirk of the past's users at a time currently. Normally one for all was used in tandem with one other quirk, but that wasn't an option here because of his unsealed muscles. The combo of the two was far too destructive, especially when he couldn't control one for all's power output all too well. So here he was, fighting Stain in this alleyway. Danger sense would enough to take down this bastard, it had to be. As Stain was recovering, Raiden went to hit him with a backhand, but Stain, with all his experience fighting pro heroes, was able to see this coming and bent all the way back, going under Raiden's arm, grabbing a knife from his own belt and threw it at the hero in training. Thanks to Danger Sense, he was once again able to dodge him. This pattern continued, Raiden barely dodging Stain's slashes while Stain expertly dodged his own. However, this all came to a halt when a gunshot rang out and blood splattered out from Stain's left side. The villain smiled a bloody psychotic smile as he coughed up blood, covering the walls with it. "So another fake arrives. You're all like flies, you just keep showing up out of nowhere." Hearing the gunshot, Raiden quickly whipped his head around and saw Momo. "Creata, what are you doing here?" Creata was panting, arm outstretched holding a gun. "Do you know how worried I was? You just shared your location, and with what's going on, I ran here as fast as I could." Raiden's eyes widened. He didn't realize that he sent his location to all his contacts instead of just All Might. "You need to get out of here, Creata. It's too dangerous. I didn't mean to send my location to all my contacts." Creata didn't listen to him as she thought that she took out Stain with that shot. "Don't worry, Raiden. There's no way he's getting up from that." She then gestured towards the collapsed Stain, only to realize too late that he was not there, as out from the shadows Stain came down and slashed Creata's back, causing blood to gush out as she fell onto her knees, and while he was behind Izuku he slashed Tenya and Native. "Haha. You think that could keep me down, as long as you protect the vitals. The human body is surprisingly sturdy." The villain then smirked savagely. "And it looks like that danger sense of yours only works when I direct my killing intent at you. Anyone else and it's useless." Raiden grit his teeth. "You bastard, how dare you do that to her?" Raiden tried to smash Stain's face in, but the man just dodged to the side and licked his blade, causing Creata to freeze as all the muscles in her body locked into place. "So what will you do now, hero? Will you save her and let me go? Or will both of you die by my hand?" This further angered Raiden and it caused him to slip up. "You bastard, I choose neither. You're fucking going down." The orange of his Volunder started to die down as shifted to a pitch black, and soon coated his entire left arm as he punched out. It felt like his entire arm was stretching as a black fist was sent at Stain, who dodged to the side, where he narrowly avoided the tendril that burst from the arm. He tried to slice at it with one of his knives, but the tendril just bent as another came from it, causing Stain to dodge to the side. He then gained a wicked smile as he threw a knife at Creata. Raiden by now had realized he had made a mistake because he had lost control of Black Whip and was struggling to rein it in. He could keep it going after Stain, but he couldn't use it to stop the knife that was about to hit a kneeling Creata, so he did the only thing he could. With Black Whip not listening to him, he held out his arm and watched as the knife stabbed directly into the ligaments of his elbow, right where there were very few muscles, directly opposite the elbow. Raiden recoiled in pain, and finally, his arm retracted back and connected as Black Whip dispersed. Within this moment Stain dashed forward at speeds imperceptible to most and ripped the knife from Raiden's arm and ripped it out as Raiden and licked it, causing him to freeze, only able to watch on as he stabbed Kreata. Or so he thought. As Kreata's nails turned black and tendrils burst from them and crashed into Stain before they retracted back, as Kreata's nails returned back to the red she had become accustomed to before they turned back to their normal color, and suddenly she felt very drowsy. Stain coughed up more blood. "I didn't think the girl would cause as much trouble as you, but who would have thought she'd have those black whips too?" He also realized she had been down for a decent amount of time, and knowing his own luck very well he decided to finish her off while both of them were still frozen. And so he brandished his sword once again. Knives were more useful against Black Whip considering how they limited the space he had to swing a sword. The leapt in the air sword raised high ready to strike down, but he would never reach his intended target. Raiden's muscles were bulging trying to fight against Stain's and Quirk. The control over his own muscles that his bond with Thrud gave him was fighting to get him to move. Stain was getting close to Kreata and he couldn't risk it going out of control so close to her. So he fought as hard as he could to move, until finally he could. He knew it wouldn't be enough to attack, but it was enough to intercept, so he got in the way of Stain's stabbing motion. And so in this moment it made Raiden wonder how it got like this. The blood splattered around the alleyway, the wounds that littered his friends' bodies, and the sword headed straight for his heart as he shielded the bleeding Kreata and Tenya from a lethal blow. In this moment he wondered how it got to this point, how it came to this, sacrificing his own life in exchange for theirs. However, things didn't go as expected since Raiden's Volunder started to glow gray before spreading to the rest of his body. As the sword started to sink into his flesh it started to go through as if all resistance vanished. Stain's sword burst through Izuku's back alongside a plume of smoke. Raiden smirked at this unexpected development, using his limited movement brought his arms in and wrapped Stain in a bear hug. "Looks like you're not going anywhere, motherfucker." He squeezed as hard as he could, his muscles still fighting against Stain's quirk. However, even the minute amount of strength that Izuku could exert was enough as a crack as Stain went limp as he screamed out in pain. Izuku let out a sigh of release as he relaxed as he saw Momo unfreeze right after, causing Stain to mutter out, "I was right, type A," and it took a few minutes but he was released from Stain's quirk. He held Stain in his still good arm as he walked over to a still frozen Tenya and Native, and now that he was starting to calm down he used Black Whip to pick them up and he decided to put Stain in with them. Having Stain next to Ida but unable to do anything as a form of ironic karma. He then walked to Momo, who hadn't been able to move because of her injuries, and picked her up holding her to his chest and whispered into her ear, "I'm so sorry, Momo. But everything is gonna be fine now, I promise. I won't let anything else happen to you." Although as he said this a winged Nomu swept down and ripped her from his arms, and in a blind rage at her being taken from her he powered up one for all to 100% and jumped at the Nomu, turning the ground beneath him into dust as he punched its upper half into a paste as he caught Momo in his arm and got the talons after her. He landed and started crying into her hair. "I'm so sorry, Momo, I'm so sorry." Momo rested her head against him and ran her hand against his chest to reassure him. "After all that, All Might finally arrived. You're late, All Might." Seeing the state of his crying apprentice and the others in front of him, All Might's smile lessened a bit. "There were too many Nomu to get here immediately. Although that's not enough, I must apologize. My boy, you must have been through a lot. With all the villains dealt, All Might took everyone to the hospital. However, amongst the turmoil no one noticed a blue-skinned reporter and her cameraman. Redistro is definitely going to love this. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Now we will see you in the next video.